degrees. We'll be back with the weather in a little while. Our top story this morning, and you figured it out, the Dow in a record $12,000 point dive as the virus fears continue. And apropos of that, we have some people who are whistleblowing say we're not quite prepared as we might have been. Again, that our top story. Locally, our top story, the New York State Comptroller will audit Mount Vernon finally. And that will be, after we talk about the virus, our topic this morning. And we will have the former mayor of Mount Vernon, who cried for that for years before his unfortunate mayoral ending. We'll have him on at 6:50. The Justice Department has established an office to denaturalize immigrants. An arrest warrant has been issued for a Rockland rabbi for failing to appear in court. And schools across the Hudson Valley are taking steps to prepare for the coronavirus. Those stories and much more coming up. First, though, we do have to go to the weather. And for those of you who prefer the video, it's up and running. We just wanted to hit our mark. Okay, the weather, as you know, is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. It sure was windy yesterday. You had some lawn furniture if you left it out there blowing around, and rugs if you had them anywhere outside got blown around. But it's 30 degrees right now. The wind's calmed down a little bit. It's going to be mostly cloudy today. The temperature topping out at about 38, but still 30-mile-an-hour wind gusts here and there. Tonight, clear skies. The temperature will be 24. And on into tomorrow, partly sunny and breezy. The temperature 36 degrees. And on into Sunday, mostly sunny skies, a high around 40. And once again, we remind you, the weather's brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. Once again, and we are in full bloom. This is Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am Bob Marrone, and this is Radio Westchester, your radio station at the train station. All kinds of news. You know, the Rangers won their 9th road win, the most in franchise history, 9th in a row. There are all kinds of rumors about Brady leaving New England, although most pundits are saying don't believe it. One rumor yesterday had him even coming to New York. Well, let's get busy. A lot going on. And the top story this morning, the Dow, a 1,200-point dive, the greatest dive in the market. Actually, it's the greatest single day by numbers. But remember, percentages are more important than the actual number, the way these headlines are written. If the market's at 5,000 and you get a 1,000-point drop, you should be heading for the windows. But a 12,000-point drop when the market's around $25,000. While it's not a good indicator, it still isn't as bad as it could be. But nonetheless, the Dow lost 1,200 points yesterday. The worst single day in its 124 history as the worsening coronavirus outbreak stroked fears of a global slowdown. The stock market was plunged into correction territory amid persistent concerns about the deadly bug, even after President Trump announced national efforts to fight the outbreak. The Dow has dropped more than 3,200 points this week. The Nasdaq and S&P 500 dropped more than 4%, each after U.S. health officials said the number of confirmed cases here had risen to 60. But indeed, one New Yorker has been tested after visiting Italy. The patient reported symptoms of the virus, this according to the health department Thursday, but further details were not provided. Please excuse me. Now, a whistleblower came forward yesterday. U.S. Department of Health and Human Services person sent more than a dozen workers to meet the first Americans evacuated from the epicenter of the coronavirus in Wuhan, China, without adequate gear to protect them against the deadly illness. The government whistleblower claims in a complaint that came to light yesterday. The whistleblower, identified as a senior Health and Human Services official based in Washington, supervises workers at the administration. Well, these things, when they break, they probably catch you unprepared to some degree. Hopefully that ship will get righted. But that's the information right now. Now, where it's going on in Italy, Japan, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, they are the most hit countries. But what we are being told is that it is likely to become a pandemic in the sense that it will go around the world. And most experts are saying it's not so much what is happening now, but what will happen that is affecting the stock markets, for those of you concerned about that. Because nothing roils the stock markets like uncertainty. Now, there are points in these kinds of drops. I say this as an old Wall Street guy in research that we did this morning. There are points in these kinds of market drops where people begin to actually realize that there are bargains out there because the world goes on after even the worst of things. So at some point, the market corrects a bit. There will be buying because stocks will become quite attractive. That is their prices. So we shall see. It is 6:39. Excuse me, please. That happens early in the morning. Now, locally, schools across the Hudson Valley are taking steps to make sure they are prepared for the coronavirus. The theme at many public schools across the valley is planning and prevention. And while there's no need to panic, say many superintendents, etc., still they want to be prepared. So we'll check in with our own school district early next week. Westchester County Executive George Latimer on Thursday delivered on a central theme of his 2017 campaign. He involved county officials and others in planning for the future Westchester County Airport from a second-floor conference room with a steady stream of private aircraft taking off in the background. Latimer announced that this plan will be supplemented. It will be looked at. The Latimer plan, which includes extensive public involvement, will include an environmental review under the state laws. So the point there being, folks, that the public will have input into what is to be done with the airport. It is 6:40. An arrest warrant has been issued for the Rockland County rabbi who failed to appear in court. One Yehuda Oshry did not show up to testify in the trial between the East Ramapo School District and the NAACP Monday. The same day, a warrant was issued for Oshry's arrest. If he appears in court today or tomorrow to give testimony, the matter will be resolved, though. And that was said yesterday, so he has until today, until the men with the cuffs come. Now, this story is the basis in a few minutes for our monologue today. It's actually 2 days old, but we didn't cover it yesterday because all the news breaking on the coronavirus, and we wanted it to be a sticking point. The State Comptroller's Office is finally auditing Mount Vernon, where details of the city's finances have been murky for some years, and issues between the city comptroller, Deborah Reynolds, and most officials have been apparent. The letter was announced in a letter to the city council late last week. Deborah Reynolds, the chief examiner of the state agency's local government and social accountability, that information was released by the chief examiner of the state agency's local government and school accountability division. We've invited Richard Thomas to come on at 6:50 on our newsmaker line because, very frankly, we would like insight into why, when he pleaded with letters and memos that we have seen here at Radio Westchester and when I was at WVOX, and also their quick turnaround after being there a day. And of course, it was not only the comptroller that the former mayor went to pleading for them to look at these records and welcoming an audit, but letters were also sent to the governor and of other high officials and investigators in the state. So here will be our point when he comes on, when we speak with Richard Thomas. With all the allegations and attacks on him, even since he left office, it would seem to the rational person that he would not want an extensive audit. Well, we're going to hear in his own words why he does and whether he fears that anything that could come out of that office would hurt him. One of the things we pledged to do when we created Radio Westchester was not to let stories die where we saw an injustice or the potential for injustice when following up on that story would be in the public interest. And this certainly is. Why now? Why after months and years? Why now? So look forward to that conversation at 6:50 this morning with former Mayor of Mount Vernon, Richard Thomas. Yonkers lawmakers have signed legislation banning the city's food and beverage establishments from providing plastic straws unless customers with a special need them. The ban, which goes into effect Sunday, comes at a time when the cities across the country are banning the product to curb negative plastic impacts on the environment. In Yonkers, we're doing our part, said the mayor, in being stewards of the environment and reducing the negative environmental impacts. Well, plastic bags, no plastic straws. How do you feel about that? That for another moment. You know, a lot of people don't know that we, among the many things that Westchester's famous for, one of them is the home of Pelham-based Archie Comics. Well, if Betty and Veronica can remain close friends while competing for Archie's heart, you'd think the two CEOs of Archie Comics could. But no, Nancy Siebercleet, and we've had her on the show many times, of Amerenik, co-CEO of Archie Comics Publications, has sued co-CEO Jonathan Goldwater and the Pelham-based firm for $100 million, accusing Goldwater of breaching a deal reached after a legal battle back in 2012. Silbercleat, in legal papers filed in January, contends that Goldwater is effectively blocking her from any role in the company. Silbercleat's husband, Michael, was the son of co-founder Louis Silbercleat. Goldwater, meanwhile, is the son of Archie Comics co-founder. He also named Goldwater. So that's what's going on hyper-locally. We've got another minute to cover a couple of other stories. Now, listen to this. You know, we've talked frequently in this show about the bail issue. Well, one guy, now listen to this, he was jailed 142 times, and he was called a serial subway scammer in the Post this morning, who allegedly tricks tourists into buying worthless Metro cards. He was sent to jail Thursday after 142 arrests. Charles Barry had enjoyed a revolving turnstile of justice for most of 2020, thanks to a new reform law that mandates zero bail for most nonviolent offenses. He was arrested 6 times this year alone for allegedly preying on Manhattan strap hangers, including February 4th. Now, it's true, these obviously weren't violent crimes, but good grief. Imagine that, 140 times. We need to have a little bit of common sense put into that law. Something that doesn't make common sense, but it's a nice story, is the New York Rangers last night, after trailing 2-0, managed to come up with 5 unanswered goals to win their 9th straight on the road. They have a busy weekend as they're very close to the playoffs now, only 4 points out. They play Philadelphia twice this week, home and away, once tonight, and I think the other game is on Sunday. That will be very interesting. Now, another story, making the rumor mills in sports, pardon me, we need to share with you. Tom Brady. We've even had rumors yesterday that Tom Brady was coming to New York. Well, now, why they would do that after they're trying to break in a young quarterback and just sent out to pasture a 38-year-old, although he, great as he was, Manning, he know Tom Brady. That rumor was out there yesterday. The other rumor going out to Los Angeles. But right now, most pundits are writing in this morning's papers and outlets that it looks like a negotiating ploy, or perhaps just Tom Brady enjoying the first time in his career that he has been able to enjoy free agency. So we're going to take a break, go to the weather, and when we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about it, and then we're going to talk with the former mayor of Mount Vernon, Richard Thomas, and give him a chance to place this in perspective. And we want to know, at least I do, and because we've been covering this story for so long, why he was unable to get any satisfaction while he was still in office why he thinks that's so, how much he feels vindicated by this or not, and why he is all for an audit that, according to his political enemies, ought to be damning to him. That when we return. All righty, let's take another look at the weather as I continue to try and chase the frog out of my throat. He never went to radio school. Get out of there. Or any of that. It is sunny and clear right now, 30 degrees, few clouds, but it won't stay like that. No rain, though. Mostly cloudy the rest of the day. Temperatures getting up to 38. Clear skies tonight. The temperature 24 degrees. The wind out of the west to 10 to 15 miles an hour. Now Saturday, that would be tomorrow. Saturday, partly sunny and breezy. A temperature of 36. Sunday, mostly sunny. Highs around 40. Getting down to 29 at night. No Monday, though. But I can't talk today. It happens. All right, Monday, mostly cloudy. The high will be 49 degrees as things warm up. The overnight low will be 40 degrees. And the weather, as always, is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses. And it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. And the bottom of the hour has been brought to you by Aging Issues Management, their colleagues, Aging Issues Radio, the law firm of Payne & Con, Dominic's Fine Cigars, and Plug-in Virtual Reality. Oh, where did it go? I fixed it. We had a loose wire. That's why you couldn't hear me. But through my genius, I have to do it Rush. Now, forget that I'm not a big Rush fan when it comes to the truth, but probably no one's a better broadcaster in understanding how it's done. And as he would say, through my excellence, friends, I was able to fix the board and reestablish my brilliance. And maybe that's it. He has excellence in broadcasting. I should have brilliance in broadcasting. And we're going to talk. I forgot to get to a story I wanted to get to here. This yesterday. Now, this has got to show you how crazy the extremes are. In a resurfaced 2017 video, self-described Democratic Socialist Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, also known as AOC, said she worked to secure a spot for her goddaughter at a Bronx charter school, and thus Snark's Reasons Billy Minion inadvertently made the case for school choice. She made it last October, too, when she shared that her family left the Bronx for Westchester, that's our humble abode, so she could attend a higher quality school. AOC has correctly diagnosed the problem, they said. But like many Democrats, won't admit school choice can help fix it because teachers' unions, a powerful part of the Democratic Party coalition, are staunchly opposed. Ocasio-Cortez's experience, though, should lead her to support school choice, and that makes total sense, to which she and her family turned to escape failing public schools. And ask Binion, can you blame them? Another shout-out. Now, this is happening in May 3rd, but it's really important because it involves cancer. A White Plains Hospital has an Answer to Cancer 5K run and block party when we get to May, and we will help support them anytime we can. We will, and this is in Court Street in White Plains. We'll give out a number right now, but we'll be giving more as we get closer to it. 914-681-1040, 914-681-1040. They will be available when you call, and you can sign up for that. Now, Richard Thomas, we're waiting for him to call, and he did. I know he texted us confirming the number, but he should know the number by now, or he could just text me even now if he wishes. Let's see if he is there. You have no idea we're producing a show, all the different things that are involved. All right, 999-4006. Yep. Let me tell him yes. Now he's up, so hopefully he will call. All righty. Why Richard Thomas and why he's calling us. When Richard Thomas And full disclosure, he announced on our show, so if that has any bias, on this show, it was 3 radio stations ago when I was at WFAS. And he came in as a councilman, and he kept pushing his idea for running for office. Even as a councilman, his concerns about the city is that the financials of the city were not transparent. Then he kept pushing and pushing and pushing and using Memorial Field as an example of what was wrong with the city and what he believed, that is the city of Mount Vernon, was indicative of corruption. Made sense. Ran for office, ran on those things. Now, full disclosure, when I say full disclosure, we can't just say we have a saint coming on the radio. I mean, he was criticized by many for his association with a private citizen, Joe Spezio, who, if he did nothing wrong by reputation nonetheless, and his position in the police department raised eyebrows, that he had too much influence and also had been someone who was a contractor, perhaps looking for business. That's everything to do with optics, but still created a lot of dissent. And then he was a guy that always didn't make a lot of friends. I think that's a fair thing to say in government, for whatever reason, pushing corruption, looking into these things. Ultimately got into this battle with the comptroller, which is the subject of this discussion, and I remember going to interview him in his office in Mount Vernon and was struck by the lack of pens and pencils and things like that, and he told me that the comptroller would not even approve those. His first person. He's going to be with us in a moment. In fact, he's on hold now, so we'll get him to talk about that. And then as his stewardship moved on, he had difficulty getting bills paid for all kinds of things. So he's not perfect. He got in trouble for campaign finance issues, and I'm not going to ask him to defend those today. That's not the purpose of it. But his tenure was marked by bills that were not paid, bills that had to be paid out of different departments because bills could not be paid. Now, the comptroller has said many times, although not on this show as much as she was invited in the past, that it was because the bills weren't ready. The issue of who dumped the dirt at Memorial Field became an issue, and everybody pushed back on that. Now, when this new mayor came in, Sean Patterson Howard, and I'm really truncating the history here, because ultimately, this new mayor came in, and we've reminded her on this show, and she was well aware of it because of the campaign and well aware of it because she had been in the planning department before she took office, was well aware of the comptroller's relationship with the mayor, the then Mayor Richard Thomas, and was aware that Thomas, I believe, and everybody was aware because we did it on this show, and we acquired records from the city of Mount Vernon that showed earnest requests by the former Mayor Richard Thomas to go to the governor, to go to the comptroller, to go to other offices, to work through other elected officials to have the city's finances audited and the books opened up. We've seen the records. This isn't that the man who's going to talk with us in a moment told us. We've seen the records. And so they finally come in, and they're there for a day. And then we've seen the next email by an operative of the comptroller's office telling the mayor, hey, we have to go, there's an emergency, and now I'm paraphrasing, and by the way, don't clean out the office you were going to clean out to have us come in and do the work. We're not doing it anymore. So Richard Thomas cuts a deal with the prosecutors, which will allow him to run for office again in a year, expunge his record over campaign finance, and he's on probation. He resigns from office, which is what he was required to do, although there were debates about when and how. And in his wake was this great, big, giant question mark. Why did anyone not look at the city finances? And the new mayor comes in, and she sat right here, right in a chair, right over there. And we said, how do you think you'll do with the comptroller? And she, I have a good relationship with her. And we challenged her because we, like everyone else, are wishing well for the new mayor, and reminded her that this isn't an issue of a relationship. She has a duty, a chartered duty, a lawful duty to pay the bills if you properly document them. So anyway, out of the blue, after all this comes this story. The New York State Comptroller will audit Mount Vernon's finances. Now, after one career was derailed, the livelihood of the mayor are called into question during these times, the former mayor, and a guy that's been fighting to keep his reputation above water. I'm wondering, sitting behind this microphone, what it's like to be Richard Thomas and know that all your letters and your pleas and your proclamations and your sincere outreach, I'm wondering what that was like. And so I figured the best way to do that was get him on the show. Please welcome the former mayor of Mount Vernon, Mayor Richard Thomas. Good morning, Mayor. How are you?
Good morning. Doing well, and yourself?
Well, I think you could tell I'm a little. I am hopeful that we have these people coming in. Mayor, what do you think? Who do you think, or how do you think someone lit a match in the cave that is the office of the Comptroller of the State of New York? A man I once admired, but who for a year now I've been calling a chicken.
You know, it's truly hard to say, but I do want to thank you for being independent and objective and looking at all the facts, and I do want to thank all the supporters and people in Mount Vernon that have supported me because, look, it's been a hard road, as you can imagine. And in my quarrel, let's just say, with the status quo, I've been fighting the status quo since I was on the city council. So this has been a long time coming, and I'm just very happy to see that the state comptroller is finally going to take a hard look at Mount Vernon's finances, and it's simply, frankly, overdue.
Now, Mayor, if some of your critics were to be believed, and I'm going to give you a chance to answer this, if some of your critics, and look, we opened this up, sure you didn't like it, you weren't perfect, but if some of your critics were to be believed, you should be terrified about a full audit of the city's finances. Yet, if I'm hearing you right, and I want to give you a chance to amplify the message, you totally welcome this.
I do. I totally welcome it. It's necessary. And, what the critics don't want you to know is that, we follow what the state comptroller's recommendations were. The state comptroller made numerous recommendations for IDAs in particular, and we implemented them. We went from a 2-page document in the IDA to a 32-page document. We went from no controls to controls, and those controls were developed by Ruskin, Moscow, Faltashek, Jerry Kremer and his firm. We had a special counsel in there, Maria Donovan. So we had nothing but what we believed to be at the time attorneys helping us put through this massive reform. And even in the water department, Ruskin, Moscow, Faltashek, and Jerry Kremer represented the water department. So all the decisions that we made around policy, we ran it through outside counsel. And that's, if anything, that's the right thing to do because it was an arm's length, ethical, logical request to make sure we're doing what we can given the circumstances.
Now, one of the things that's going to come up, and again, I know you welcome it and you can differ with me if that's the case. One of the things that's going to come up, if I understand it correctly, and I underlined that 3 times, is that you were compelled, according to what's on the record, you were compelled to pay bills out of the water department because where you had more control, because you were unable to get the controller to cooperate in paying bills that were important to the city.
Well,
is that fair?
Let's give people, I guess, a little bit more context, if that's all right. Mm-hmm. Given the fact that we went to court and got 5 different court orders against the comptroller and the city council,
they
obstructed us.
They did a lot of good, those court orders.
And they laid the foundation for us to go back to our outside counsel attorneys to make the request of, hey, we got these bills due. What do we do? The comptroller still has not, handed over a check. We're being sued. We have tenants in various units that the city supports through our grant programs about to be evicted. What do we do? The outside counsel came back with language that's consistent with state law from what we were, advised. And they came back with language that said, you can do this because it's been done in other places. And one of the places that it was done was the New York State Thruway Authority and how they built the Tappan Zee Bridge. Monies were diverted from the MTA to the Thruway Authority to help build the bridge because there were different dynamics there that required funding. So there's nothing really different than what we did because of the funding crisis that we faced.
But I think
in our situation,
excuse me,
the crisis was backed up by a court order.
No,
I
think
backed
the
up
story
by
here,
real obstruction on the ground that was hurting real people.
I think
we made
Mayor,
decisions on an emergency basis, and that emergency status was constantly in effect because it didn't matter. Even if I did it or didn't do it, they would say and claim that I did it, and they would claim it was criminal, and it wasn't. It was just
Mayor,
us trying to protect
if
the
I
people.
may, I think the main part of the story here is that you welcome the audit and you welcome their looking into this. Now, there have been other issues, and again, excuse me, I got a frog in my throat who thinks he can do the radio. Excuse me. Mayor, we've seen other records. We've seen, and you've talked about some of the loans that had been made in the past. I remember this, look forward. No, I think that it's a mistake to just look forward and not understand what contributed to all this. There were loans given out with curious terms, and there are amounts of money on the books, debits in the accounts that are significant. Do you expect the comptroller to see these?
I do expect the controller to see it, but I'm not sure what the controller is going to do about it. It's just curious because, I just want to focus on the fact that how, this is all politics because I do hope that the controller really questions those loans, but my faith is shaken in this only because of what happened. So I would say I'll leave it to the press to determine whether or not how accountable they're going to hold the controller. But the Journal News in specific, they really dismissed this issue overall, and I just don't know how they can do that. And I really have to give credit to you for being one of the few outlets to really take it seriously.
Well, this story, although it probably came out of a press release, the story that I quoted this morning was by Jonathan Bandler from the Journal News. I had, in press scrums and stuff, it had reached a point where, and you've seen this with baseball managers and football coaches, et cetera, where I sensed that some people in the press were saying, well, Richard Thomas is toast, let's move on. And I don't know if someday off air, I'll tell the rest of the people on there why I follow up on stories like this. But I think it's important to come back to this because the sunlight does, Mayor. If you did other things financially that are inappropriate, guess what? You're in a lot of trouble. Because here comes the controller finally, and you welcome it. And that's the message I want people to hear today. Now, I want to go back to something else. What do you think triggered this happening now? Do you think it was that fight in City Hall between the mayor and the controller? Or do you think that the powers that be are finally ready for the controller to move on?
Can you state that again? Because I just want to make sure I understood.
Okay. What do you think precipitated the controller's office finally doing what you had begged them to do for years? And not only did they not do when they came in for a day, they left. And as your career was put in a meat grinder.
Well, look, I think one of the things that I can tell you is I don't see this as necessarily a completely bad thing. Unfortunately, someone had to stand up for the people of Mount Vernon. Someone had to fight. And what I do want to add and what I do want to say about the controller's move right now is it's a great step toward finally getting transparency in Mount Vernon's books. It's a great step toward finding a way to hold people more accountable. And for me, in particular, I just want to say that I never objected to having my campaign finance records reviewed. You know, it's if errors were made, errors were made. What I always contended and what I always objected to was the fact that the process of how my records were obtained and scrutinized. And that's a nuance, and I just want to give everybody a quick comparison. You know, Westchester legislator Chris Johnson went before the State Board of Elections, and he was ultimately penalized $1,000 for mishandling his campaign finances. So if he could go through that process, how come I could not?
Well, that's all true, you know. But it is also true, Mayor, and you know this, that there is no dispute as to what happened. There were bad optics. There was a very expensive purse bought. Yeah.
Forget the optics.
Politics is optics these days, Mayor.
But that's the problem. Our Constitution says we're supposed to have due process. We're Americans. We're not, you know, in Russia. We're not in another third world country. We're in America. But for some reason, the due process that I believe I'm entitled to as an American were violated. The point is, the state attorney general is not supposed to just skip every step and get a look at your campaign finances and criminalize them. You're supposed to go to the State Board of Elections first. But here's the rub. Once the controller of the state of New York activates an investigation into your government, it's a government investigation. The AG used that move as a pretext to then back into...
Okay, but back up a little bit, because you're confusing us. Are you saying that the controller had been involved once before, but only with respect to your finances, not with respect to the controller?
No. New York State Controller Tom DiNapoli,
yes,
his office opened an investigation into Mount Vernon's finances 30 days into my administration.
Right.
That became the justification for the AG to then look at my government, and then from there, the AG took steps to investigate.
Okay, but here's where I need you to hold it up, because I need people to understand this. Is you're saying the controller did come in 30 days in to look at your campaign finances,
No.
but not at the rest of the city?
No. Well,
because
that's what happened. But the state controller came into Mount Vernon as soon as I was mayor. As soon as I was elected mayor, they started investigating my government.
No, I understand. But what I'm hearing is all they did was look at your campaign finances, because why didn't they come back 3 years later when you said you need to look at all this other stuff?
But it's more than that. You know, they were constantly looking at the IDA. They were constantly looking at the water department. They were looking at DPW. They were looking
as well.
At
they should have
these problems in real time. So I'm just kind of like, why didn't you do something back then?
Well,
the whole objective was to get Rich Thomas.
Well, perhaps, but Mayor, what I would, from my perch here, with obviously it's easier for me to be objective. The real issue is, and again, if that was the objective, it may be apparent, but we may never know for sure. But what we can demand an answer for, if not that, is why 2 to 3 years later, when you begged them, and those are my words, but I've seen the documents, when you begged them to come in and look at the finances and deal with the controller, why they didn't do it. And again, why they're finally coming in now. Do you have any sense of what brought them in now?
You know, I have my own theories, but what I know is the following. You know, I have faith that the best decisions are going to be ultimately made. The best decision is going to be to hold this controller, who's just, you know, way out of line, accountable. And my belief is we're finally going to get some transparency in Mount Vernon's finances.
Well, before you go, when we talk about transparency in the finances, given your expertise, given you've worked with these things, given, and I'll underscore this for you, and I'm leaving out your campaign finance issue because you did plea out.
I want to keep it up. Don't leave it out. Because
No, I'm leaving it out only for this discussion because I don't want to muddy these waters. Where else in the city do you think that they need to look extra hard at? The IDA, the Urban Renewal Agency. Where do you think we're liable to see fires when they look?
So first, I think they need to look at the comptroller herself. She has paid her attorney without there being any Board of Estimate approval or submission. She's made wire transfers with just her name on it only, so she doesn't have to issue checks, so we don't know who she's paid. She's held monies from the school district, our children, hostage. She has held monies from retirees, overtime for DPW, fire, police workers. She won't even pay them. She has done everything in the book that you can, criminalize, but yet they hold her up as if she's a saint because she blocked and obstructed Richard Thomas. And they forget it's not just me, it's bigger than me. It's about the people of Mount Vernon. So you have to look hard at her and ask yourself, how could she spend so much money, block everybody out, and yet nobody can do anything to her or her office? How could she have so much executive authority?
Well, that's the question we keep asking. Similarly, when she was able to defy court orders with absolutely no consequence. I mean, we saw a case where we did a story this morning where a rabbi, for goodness sakes, a man of the cloth, was told he's going to go to jail if he doesn't report to court today. Yet when she was ordered to open the books for your administration, she was able to say, no, I ain't doing it, and there was no consequence. But again, I'm no lawyer. I don't know that. Listen, I know there are a lot of things involved in this, and I wanted to give you a minute to give your take on this and tell people how much you welcome this audit, what your take is and what you're looking for. Give us a summary.
So one of the things I know is that I really look forward to this audit being taken place because it's way overdue. And what I do know is that there are issues with the Urban Renewal Agency. You have $96 million in federal loans that are undocumented, unaccounted for, and you have a scenario where the city is being asked to pay back much of those loans. About $3 million at least right now is being demanded back. And
well, in other words, but who's demanding that money? The federal government. In other words, the federal government gave money to the city of Mount Vernon. The city of Mount Vernon loaned that money out. The federal government's looking to get payback, correct?
That's correct. That happened under previous administration.
I want people to understand that. Now, are those debits, if you will, I'm being an old Wall Street guy, we call it, are those obligations, are those debits still on the books as we speak to your knowledge?
They are. And our previous auditor, or our auditor, O'Connor Davies, was trying to get me to write those loans off. The $3 million, the $96 million. They were trying to get me to write it off. And I said, well, I need to understand what it is before I just say these liabilities become the liability exclusively of the taxpayers of Mount Vernon.
You know, Richard Thomas, I have been in a professional position to have to write off seven-figure amounts. And you require a big file and a good explanation before you write off hundreds of thousands, millions, or tens of millions. Were there any explanations given to you, or were you just told to write them off as irreconcilable?
If you have a beep button, I think if you just use that for a moment and then add the word off after it, you'll know what I was told by our auditors, the council, the former controller, the current controller.
Well, your auditor should have been fired in that case, from my point of view.
And that's where the fight broke out, Bob. Because the moment I started saying, look, we need to get a different set of auditors in here, all hell broke loose.
Huh. Well,
and that's where, again, look, I'm just giving you the sequence of what happened, and that's why I'm saying you have to look at it for what it is. This is a bigger issue. This is a bigger matter that relates to a lot of money. And I hope that the controller is transparent with their audit. And if they want to talk to me about anything,
I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to ask you. Finish that thought.
Yeah, I'd love to sit and talk with them, but I can give them documents in advance. I mean, remember, we put a lot in court. We already pointed out that the the city controller has been making payments unilaterally. Remember, she removed me from the bank accounts Remember, the bank called the cops on me when I started asking questions, even though I was a signatory on the account and had a court order. So I just want to emphasize, like, there's something up with Mount Vernon's money, and to me, it's not just a conspiracy, it's a reality. So my hope and my prayer is that as they dig into this situation, they don't hold back. And I'll be more than happy to provide whatever documents, whatever policy decisions that we made to bring in the lawyers that make the decision with us to make sure that the decision was made legally, ethically, and morally.
This much I can promise you, the mayor of Mount Vernon, the controller of Mount Vernon, assuming she's for motherhood and apple pie, that we will reach out to whomever is the communications person for the controller's office, and we will request updates. Also, we will give access to you to these microphones to raise the questions that need to be raised. I want to thank you very much this morning for your candor. Any final words? Take 30 seconds.
I just want to say thank you to all the people in Mount Vernon. Thank you to you for being independent and objective and looking at this. And, while my time in public service is over for now, I'm in a new chapter of my life. And while many want me to run for comptroller or run for mayor again, I'm on to different things. So my only focus is I'm going to continue to agitate. I'm going to continue to encourage that people stand up in Mount Vernon and work toward the greater good.
Okay.
And if it's, supporting the current mayor, I'm going to support her because Memorial Field will get fixed. If it's supporting the current council because they're finally standing up to the controller, I'm going to support them. Even though all the things happened in the past, it's in the past. So let's just keep looking ahead and just say, let's get it right. We wasted a lot of time, money, and it's time to just move on. Let it all be in the past because the future is much better and it can be much brighter if we just work together and stop
Thank
being
you very
like
much.
the National Democrats.
Mayor Richard Thomas.
Disorganized.
Thank you very much. Mayor Richard Thomas, everybody. We'll be right back with Vince Russo in just a moment. Public official will get his take. Alrighty, let's go take a look at the weather as we come up on 7:20. We pretty much know what it is, but we do it every 15 minutes or so you can be appraised. We've got sunshine on this Friday, February 28th, 2020. It's 30 degrees, but sun is in the air. They're telling us, though, that later on it'll be mostly cloudy. The temperature will level off at about 38. Tonight, clear skies, 24 degrees. Wear your kimono. Saturday, partly sunny and breezy. The temperature will be 36. The wind will be out of the west-northwest, 10 to 25. Still some gusts. Sunday, mostly sunny. The high will be 40 degrees. And the weather's brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle. They are voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. And we move on to a man who's a public official, knows a lot about a lot of things, just a wonderful guest, and sort of gets us warmed up every day on the issues. In fact, I'm going to share with him after I bring him on a story he'll remember and why I follow up on old stories. Please welcome Vince Russo. Vince, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Bob.
Vince, do you remember way back, it's 30-some-odd years now, when that hockey team, a minor league hockey team, was coming to New York City, to Staten Island?
Yes.
And the paper kept writing, the Phil Esposito Center is almost ready. And so I drove out there. And not only was it not ready, but the car dealership that was on the site was still there.
Yeah, I remember it distinctly.
And remember, another 6 months later, it's nearing completion. I drove out, still nada. Then another story, and the team moved to Troy. And so I finally called the writer, and I said, "Are you aware of this?" No, they tell me he never drove out there. And when I years later, 15 years later, when I came to do the news, I promised myself, and I've got a few stories like this. This is apropos of the man I was talking to before you came on. When a story didn't end well, when it was not logically reconcilable, that there was news in that fact. And even if it turns out differently than I might have thought it was, I always follow up on those stories. Like we have Marrone, it's a very well-to-do community. They got a murder there. Everybody and their grandmother knows, like 10 years old now, who did it. And I call the cops there. They're Boy Scouts with guns. They still haven't resolved it. So every once in a while, I get the family on and I rub that nerve raw. And it was really informed by that incident. I realized that people in the news, my colleagues, unfortunately, when something passes on, they don't go back to it. And I do not understand that. If you've just heard the mayor before, there's a $95 million debit, and you know what a debit is, V, on the books for money they loaned out. Nobody knows who got it. It's ridiculous. And so this guy you just heard, right? He begged the comptroller to come in, memos, letters, please. They chased him out of office, and now they come in anyway.
Well, people in the news media don't go after old things because the root of the word is new. So it's not, news. News means here's a bunch of new things.
That's true.
So they are very reluctant, unless it's some high-profile, murder case or, a child who was abducted many years ago was found either dead or
But you
alive
see, but that's why, but see, this is news. The fact that the comptroller, whom we elected, who I supported for 8 years, and interviewed him many times, when I saw the records myself with my own eyes, that's a story in and of itself, that we have a comptroller who's not doing his job, probably for political reasons, or who is acquiescing. That's a story to me. Now,
and it takes someone to dig into all of those facts and to try and come up with the scenario that is currently going on.
No. So that's why when I see this story here, hey, we're coming in to look at the books. Well, you let a guy's life get ruined. That's a story.
Yeah, the news media let a guy's life get ruined with Tawana Brawley.
Well, yes, they did. And by the way, apropos of that, do you know who's never had Al Sharpton on?
You.
Yeah, and the reason is that until he apologized, when his people from the Action Network call, and he has some wonderful people working for him, when they call, I say if he's willing to apologize for what he did to that prosecutor, then he can come on. Otherwise, I won't do it. And there are things he's done since at times that I've actually respected, but that I just could not abide. I just can't. Anyway, but the news media's got to do a better job of looking back at stories. Anyway, I'm sorry, I digress.
Let's get the elephant in the room out of the way real quickly. Montreal got their keisters kicked.
I wasn't going to mention it. I was not going to mention it.
But you know what? It's indicative of the Montreal season.
But you look great for 2 periods.
Yeah, well, that's right. Number one, the Ranger goalie played very well. And number two, this is the 10th home game that Montreal lost coming into the third period with a lead.
Yeah.
So, they were winning 2-1 towards the end of the second period, and they gave up a late goal, which is what they usually do. It was less than a minute to go in the period.
Mm-hmm.
So it was 2-1. And then from there, third period, Rangers just scored 4 more goals, and that was all she wrote. So
they got a couple of lucky bounces, and they needed them because the Rangers weren't playing well for 2 periods. So they
weren't playing well for 2 periods, but the third period they picked up their game and they played better. And they deserved the win. They out hustled Montreal in that period, and the Habs could not hold on to a lead.
You know what's indicative, though, of a problem that they have? One of your best players, and he could play for any team I ever coached, with an exception, he has to change, is that guy Gallagher is a great player. but there's absolutely no need for the tripping penalty was an accident from working hard, but
Yeah.
there's no need to get a cross-checking penalty in the offensive zone. None, zero.
Yeah.
And you can't. I mean, they didn't score on it, but the game turned a little bit there because you guys were on a roll.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have a lot of finishers, although I have to say, Thomas Tatar, who's been a solid player for years in the league, that was some move he put.
That was a really
He actually
good
faked
goal.
me out of my clothes. I was watching the game.
That was. I didn't think he had hands that good.
Hands. He made moves like an epileptic seal. I mean, I didn't. I didn't.
Man, I tell you what, that was really a pretty goal. But, they're few and far between, and, now they're going to say, oh, we're rebuilding and blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I think it's time for Mark Bergevin to go as
It's time for
general
Mark to
manager.
go.
And
Well, you got to have patience, and you got to. I mean, you got to give the Rangers credit. In fact, we'll be talking with Jake obviously in 30 minutes. But I was telling Jake that I think the Jeff Gorton should be GM of the year now, no matter what else the Rangers do. What he's done since that memo went out has been extraordinary. I mean, I've never seen a young team play like this. They still make young team mistakes, though, and make me want to scream. But you do notice guys like Mark Stahl are getting a lot of ice time because you can't have 40 shots a game.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing with they finally put Brendan Smith back on defense when they traded Brady Skay. You need guys that don't mind playing defense.
Yeah. Did you see the Hershey Bears game where two guys went toe-to-toe? I mean, it was a classic. Just hold on with one hand and just
I heard about it. I didn't
wail
see
away.
well,
And one guy got knocked out unconscious and had to be carried off on a
Oh,
stretcher.
that's unfortunate. But they were both
Yeah.
wailing. Well, you know what it is in that league? You got the second best league in the world. Guys are a step away. They just say, I'm just going to throw them. If I lose, I lose. Now, you have Netflix, right?
No. No, I don't.
Oh, geez, I got to see how I can get this to you. There's a movie, or whatever you want to call it, documentary called Ice Warriors, about what it's like to be a tough guy in the NHL. Incredible piece, just incredible. And has all the guys there, all the big names that fight and how they fight and what they do, and they're all smart guys, most of them. And some of them talking about one guy talks about how embarrassing it was when he got knocked out. He goes, the good thing about when you get knocked out is, you didn't see it coming. So the next thing you know, you're lying on the ice.
But is it about contemporary guys or
Oh,
the
no,
old
contemporary guys. No, a couple of years. No. These are the Luke Gadzik and guys like that, McGrattan. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I would say if it's got a postmark on it, it's 3 years old.
Okay.
But really called Ice Guardians, and it's about. Doctors are on it, but they talk about how in the locker room they're the most popular people, and oh God, I have to arrange for you to see that. Maybe come out to your house and play it. It's on my phone or whatever. It's that good.
Yeah.
But it's the honesty of these guys, and talk about Nick Fotiu is quoted, Schultz is some of the older guys, but the newer guys that are also can play. It's a lot about that. And
Well, we talked to Dave Schultz numerous times about that stuff,
it-
and how he. It was funny because I had asked him if he was sent out, if Freddie Shero sent him out to fight, and he just kind of laughed, and he said, "Look, nobody had to tell me."
Nobody.
To fight.
But he's talked about it. He talks about it in the documentary. But also, if you remember in his book, towards the end of the book he wrote, he says he was afraid, and a lot of these guys talked about it. One of the things is sometimes when you're going into a city and maybe Georges Larac is there,
Yeah.
and you may have to fight him that night. He says by the time the game starts, you're tied up in knots, and then you don't know whether you're disappointed or happy when he's scratched. Or
Right.
he's not going to play. But it's called Ice Guardians. Maybe you can even find it on YouTube, but it's on Netflix, and it's really very good.
And it's interesting you mentioned Georges Larac because he's an example, I think, of what you're saying because he was an incredibly tough guy, but he was one of the nicest people going. He did a lot of charitable work in the city. He did philanthropic things.
Oh, yeah. Well, another thing that they talked about, occasionally a rookie would come up or a guy who was on the bubble, and they even have a tape right on the ice. And the guy says, look, I got to go. If I don't go with you tonight, I'm going to be sent down. He says,
Yeah.
all right, good luck. And then they throw off the gloves and start whacking one another. If Georges Larac said he was going to have a fight with me for my good, I'd say, see ya.
Well, see, I think any documentary like that, if they look back in time to any degree, is remiss if they don't include Gordie Howe in that, because in his era,
Yes.
he had the game beat.
Yes. Well, he did. But, well, you know what? He didn't have to fight very much. There were a few guys like that. You know who was very underrated that way? Andy Bathgate was a very tough guy who almost never fought, didn't have to.
And another guy, too, was Beliveau.
Oh, yeah. When he came up, he fought too much. In fact, that's why they brought up your pal. The greatest, the original enforcer was, oh God, I forget his name.
Johnny Ferguson?
Johnny Ferguson, to say, hey, look, you don't have to fight. This guy. And I know, folks, it sounds barbaric, and fighting is really almost out of the game now. But something that Brett Hull said, he said very honestly that he would not have been the hockey player he was had he not had guys like Tony Twist on his team.
Yeah.
Because the stars get run out because the game is played at such a fast pace. He says, notice Gretzky never won anywhere without
Marty McSorley.
Without McSorley. And then when he went to the Rangers, if you remember, the Rangers got a number of tough guys. They always made sure to protect their stars. So they had to do it. So much for hockey very quickly. Biden had a nice win yesterday. He's back in the race.
Yeah, he is. There's news stories all over the internet about how the DNC is trying to derail Bernie Sanders.
One can hope.
They're all afraid that he's going to pull the whole thing down. But, Bob, the thing that troubles me is that it defeats the will of the people. I think, I don't think Bernie's that good, and I don't agree with a lot of his ideas. But, this happened in the previous presidential nominating process where they rigged the primary.
Well, is it a rig if a superdelegate has that power?
Absolutely. It's a rig.
Well, then it's not a rig if he has that. If one has that power, it's like the electoral college.
Why go through the charade of having primaries?
I don't disagree with that, but I do believe at the end of the day, the party should have the person they want. And I feel that way about the Republicans,
too. Well, who is the party, though? The party is the people who are the members and the people who vote in the primaries. There's no legal.
That should be the nominee. Well, I understand that from a moral point of view, but there's no legal, and I'm being very hypocritical here, but I'm going to take advantage of a loophole. There's no constitutional or legally binding law that requires it. All it requires is that the party comes out with a nominee. Now, is it disingenuous if one of their members got more votes than any other person? Sure it is, but it's legal.
Well, then let's be upfront and tell the people we are just pulling your chain. And
well, of course it's pulling their chain. When's the last time in a primary, either one, on either side, that you heard anything constructive come out of it?
Well, that's not the point, though. I mean, I think the point is that
Vince, you win the moral argument.
Yeah, I mean, if people are given an opportunity to choose the candidate,
we understand your sentiment, but you know what? You're stupid. I'm deliberately being contrarian because I understand your point, but thank God it's not legally binding because we're in a world now where the law doesn't matter anyway. And so if it was legally binding, I would not only have to agree with you, I'd have to hold my nose, but it's not. But we have a president that doesn't care about the law. So if someone wants to go one notch down and do something disingenuous that's not illegal, well, let them go do it.
Well, one of the things about primaries, though, that I think should be illegal, in certain states, you can do crossover. So if you are not a Democrat, you can vote in the Democrat primary. And that's ridiculous.
Oh, he called it the Democrat primary. You've been listening to Fox News too much. Go ahead.
The people who are members of that party should be the ones who choose their nominee. If you are not a member of that party, you should have no voice in choosing the nominee.
Well, you know what? I think we need to come up with rules. See, morally, I agree with you, but I see if you're going to have a primary, and this is why I don't, because just to if I can rationalize my hypocrisy, until every member of the party is involved in the primary, I don't know that it ought to be binding. So if you're going to do that, then everybody in the party should vote, and then it ought to be binding and legally binding. Listen, I got to go. I'm sorry about your Habs. I'll send flowers.
I'll
Take
speak
care.
to you next week, Bob.
Yeah, I'll talk to you over the weekend. Take care. Vince Russo, everybody. Bye. We can talk about anything and everything, and I know Janelle Albritton's been trying to get in, and we will get her on directly. This is Radio Westchester. I'm Bob Marrone. We have a lot to talk about with Jake today. Now, Jake, before we get to you, your rumor yesterday had legs. It made the news last night, and that was the rumor that Tom Brady may come to the Giants, but just about every pundit worth their salt shot that down. Now, the phone was ringing, and I'm pretty sure it was Janelle Albritton, and we ran just a little late with Richard Thomas. Now, I'm looking. No, was it Richard Thomas? Where is my... I'm looking at the wrong card. That's why A.J. Woodson's going to be on at 8:20, not at 7:20. Now, 7:38... well, we certainly have enough to talk about. We don't need to fall back on that. We did the story about the New York State Comptroller. Now, for those of you who are just joining us, you really need to understand that the markets are probably going to take a tank again today. And there are certain stages when a market goes down. One is whatever the trigger is. It could be a change in the interest rate. In this case, it's the uncertainty of the coronavirus and where it might lead, and to a pandemic, which means it's in many, many different countries, and they really can't control its spread. So you have that initially. Then you have panic selling because people don't want to lose the gains they've made. And then at some point, and it really is market-based, at some point, the price of a stock drops below a point where people say, oh my God, this is just too cheap. I got to buy it because sooner or later it's got to come back. And they're right. Or heaven forbid, and this is really an opportunity to buy, when a stock falls below the actual true value of the company as opposed to its value as a security called a market cap. So sooner or later, these things always end. Even the biggest problem, though, long term, is if the coronavirus should lead to businesses being shuttered, either for weeks or months. We've already seen in Japan, they've closed the schools for 2 weeks. There are businesses and there are supplies that are not now ready available at the same price. So depending on the degree of the coronavirus, what we may well see in this country and other countries is much needed products not made, money not put into the economies of different countries, including our own, and also the prices of certain goods as they become scarce going up. And then you're in, then you have all kinds of problems. And what we don't ever want to happen, where these things become ultimately, I shouldn't say ultimately, penultimately, because ultimately we'd all be out of money and running around with guns, and that's not going to happen. But penultimately, you have the issue of a liquidity crisis, where people who have bought things on credit or who have bought things in the value of, let's say, a house, or bought something in the value of an underlying portfolio, now those loans begin to be called in because the portfolio is no longer worth the value. It no longer has the value that it had. Ergo, it can no longer secure the loan, so the loan gets called in, and now you have a liquidity crisis. So those things we need to look out for. So let's keep an eye on how the coronavirus goes, and let's see who is on the line. Good morning. You're on the air on Radio Westchester.
Janelle Albritton.
Hi, Janelle. How are you?
Friday duty.
What was that? Was that a shower I heard in the background? What was that noise?
My radiator is kind of, loud.
What you're supposed to tell me is you're hot and you're steaming.
I'm smoking hot.
That's my girl.
Time to open a window.
Janelle Albritton, the smoking hot jazz singer, but has an eclectic background. She comes to us with her prime moniker as the managing editor and publisher of the, I almost gave the wrong newspaper out, let me get this right, the
Oh,
Oh no, you don't
Bobby.
understand. I go from one issue to the other. I was just talking
I
about
know.
liquidity crisis. I don't know if you know what that is as a singer, but uh, we're talking, of course, with the Westchester County Post.com. She's the managing editor and publisher, and following her, coming close to the 8 o'clock hour, we talk with one of her minions there. He is the editor of her sports department.
Not
Anyway,
many.
oh, he's not a minion anymore? Has he been elevated to?
Never was.
He
Oh, we
calls you
had
the
such a great
boss?
time
He calls you the.
yesterday.
What's that?
We had such a great time yesterday. We were at Iona College with our new team member, Anthony Benelli, who was behind the camera, Callis in front of the camera, and we shot a video called Houston, We Have a Problem, Part 3.
Okay, you ever need.
Running commentary on the Astro scandal.
Oh, well, I'm glad. Yes, I know. I saw his. He put out a not a tweet about that, but he put out some information about Houston. We have a problem. All right, what's going on with you? What's the latest with the newspaper? Have you done any more work with this gentleman that keeps people well through meditation, etc.?
Oh, wow. He in Florida, in Tampa, Florida in May, which is really exciting for an intensive workshop. I'll put that up on the wellness.
Are you going to go? Has he invited you to any of these yet?
Oh, no, I'm not. He's like a rock star on the planet. Like he's probably have interplanetary fame by now. But one day I will meet him and shake his hand and thank him for everything he does for humanity. But the latest thing on the website, it will be going up today, is a community calendar. I'm very excited about it. Tons of events. You just go into community calendar. It drops down to 6 locations in the county. We started with all 4 cities plus Dobbs Ferry and Mount Kisco. We're going to build on that. So just click on that, poke around, and see if anything interesting is happening over the weekend. Lots going on. Very exciting stuff. And videos going up also later today. Steve Callis is really doing the most incisive analysis that I've seen of the Astro scandal. The part 3 that we shot yesterday was brilliant, and I think you're going to really enjoy the incisiveness and depth that he goes into with it.
Well, we'll be talking about him in about 10 minutes' time. We'll be talking with him, so that's a good thing. What else are you up to? When are you singing next and where?
Tonight in Tuckahoe at Toscana. I'll be there with my 2 really good friends, Rob Thomas, professor of strings at Berklee College of Music. He lives in Manhattan, commutes back and forth, comes home on the weekends. So Fridays he's able to perform with me. Tonight he'll be on cello with Dmitry Kolesnik, a resident of Yonkers, who will be on double bass. And we were a trio a year ago on City Island at the Artist. And it's the first time they actually performed together after hearing each other's names, playing with mutual musicians for some 30 years. Playing together with me on stage was the first time that they had actually performed together. And it was such a great time. We're going to reprise that tonight from 6 to 9 at Toscana.
I'm sure you'll do a very good job. What else is coming up that you're going to be doing?
Well, performance-wise, on Saturday, March 7th, I've gotten into the regular rotation at Martini Grill out by the Meadowlands in New Jersey, which is very exciting. I'll be a duo with an excellent young piano player from Detroit. His name is Nick Masters. He's once a month now rotating through Smalls down in Manhattan. He has his own trio, and that's just going to be excellent. For more information, you can check on Westchester County Post, Arts and Entertainment. What else? I was just booked also. I performed at the IHD benefit down in Manhattan this Tuesday. It's an organization based in Tarrytown that runs programs for developmentally disabled children and adults and supports their families as well. And Philip James was the patron for that band. We had a great time And he hired me again to perform at the New Rochelle Opera Gala on May 20.
You're going to perform now. How will you? At the gala. That's terrific that you're going to get a chance to do that. I've been at that gala many times. I used to be on their board. They do wonderful work.
I remember that. You were the one who got me to see the production of Carmen. About
I got
5
you
years
involved
ago.
I got you involved in a lot of stuff. I have to remember that. I discovered.
You really have.
Actually, you came. I remember when you
did.
first came to my show over on WFAS. A question that I
Yes,
did have.
with Joe Parisi. That was a fun day.
Do you still have, are you still doing a specific Mount Vernon publication or sub-publication within the Westchester County Post?
I am. I have an Instagram account and a Facebook page for Mount Vernon Post. And there's an occasional post there, but most of my posts are going onto the Facebook page, Westchester County Post, and onto the website, westchestercountypost.com. But some Mount Vernon events do appear on the westchestercountypost.com website. And Mount Vernon, of course, being one of the 4 cities, is an option under the community calendar section.
Wow.
So there's a lot going on at the Mount Vernon Public Library. They've got great programs for kids. They've got Comic-Con. They've got, jazz groups going through. They've got adult classes. They've got a crochet club, spelling bee contests, lots of great stuff happening at the library. And all of those events are appearing on the Mount Vernon selection under community calendar.
Okay, this is good for us to remember. Listen, break a leg one more time before you go. Where are you appearing this weekend?
Toscana on Main Street in Tuckahoe. We start at 6 p.m. We finish at 9 p.m. And then probably tomorrow, I was invited by the piano player, Chris. I will probably sit in for a few songs at Alvin and Friends. So that's going to be fun.
Okay, well, have a great weekend. Janelle Albritton, the managing editor and publisher of the Westchester County Post. Thank you very much. We will be talking with, I referred to her as a minion only because he is one of the editors who works for her. He is in charge of their sports department and also is a broadcaster in his own right. We'll be talking with him in just a couple of minutes. We want to get, even as we talk with Mr. Stephen Callis, we want to get our own Jake Schaefer in the seat of honor. It's time to get him on. And speaking of the seat of honor, a little later this morning, at 8:20, we're going to be talking with A.J. Woodson. At 8:35, Dr. Victor Sternberg about the pandemic. But then we will be talking with Mimi Rocha. She is the MSNBC legal and political analyst. She will be in our studios shortly after 9 o'clock. Mimi Rocha is running for the district attorney seat. She's primarying the previously interviewed by us, Anthony Scardino, excuse me. Let's take a look at where we're at. It is 7:50 on the button, and we see that we just missed him, so he will call back. There he is. We will get to Stephen Callis in just a moment, but first we need to do a little bit of business here. 7:51. We're supported this hour by Aging Issues Management, the law firm of Pena & Con, Dominic's Fine Cigars, and Plug-in Virtual Reality. And we'll have more to say about Dominic's Fine Cigars in just a few minutes. But he joins us every week at this time. He is the editor, the sports editor at the Westchester County Post. Radio personality. He appears on The Fanatic down in Philadelphia frequently. He also does a podcast with other professionals. He's a regular on this program. Brilliant guy, fun guy. Please welcome Steve Callis. Good morning, Stephen. How are you?
Good morning, Bob. Great to be with you and Jake as always.
Well, Jake is on the line, and he's going to be holding me. You'll be with us when he holds me accountable. When we hit 8 o'clock, he holds. Excuse me, my frog is very busy today. He holds me accountable for my hockey picks. I've been doing pretty well, so we'll see how I did last night.
Not surprisingly.
All right. We know that you've done a series of stories. In fact, and I kidded. She says, you're no longer a minion. You're the king.
I got a promotion.
Yeah, your boss said that you did a great piece again yesterday regarding Houston. We have a problem. Now, we saw, before you get into that, we want to add a little pile on here. We saw a piece in the paper that suggested that now spin rates and changes in spin rates and maybe putting a substance on the ball is adding to that. A, is that true? B, do you think it's just some tinfoil-headed paranoia?
Well, I don't know what the evidence is. I haven't seen that yet, but certainly, in time immemorial, people have tried to put stuff on the ball. As you know, in the early 20th century, the spitball was legal. And even when it was outlawed, they let those 15 pitchers who were still throwing spitballs in the early 20s throw them till the end of their careers. So whenever people talk about, for example, how Babe Ruth couldn't hit today's pitching, and he used that heavy bat that you could see at Cooperstown, nobody today has really constantly faced spitballs or shine balls or loaded up balls on a regular basis, which Ruth had to do at the beginning of his career.
That's true. So you don't rule that out. Hey, Jake, say good morning.
Good morning.
Say hello to Steve. He's got a smirk on his face.
Uh-oh, does that mean you didn't do well in hockey last night?
No,
Is that
Bob,
what that means?
Bob's been kicking butt lately.
And taking names, Callis, taking names. All right. Now back to Steven, and we'll have a lot more from Jake in a little while, and you both want to throw in. So you're not dismissing that out of hand, but you wouldn't be surprised. Is that a fair statement?
Well, look, once you start lying, you can't stop. Once you start cheating, to me, you can't stop. So you just don't know. I mean, I hadn't heard anything about the pitchers. They were a dominant group with Cole and Verlander, of course. But you don't know. The thing I heard was the debate whether what was worse, what the Astros did with, banging garbage cans to give out signals versus, the old doctoring the ball. That's like a debate now. But because the Astros did it all year, at least in 2017, all through the postseason into 2018, I think that's far worse than a singular pitcher doctoring a baseball.
Now, what about your most recent update, Houston, we have a problem? Where's the story going for you at this point?
Well, I don't think it's going to end. They've got 81 road games. The Astros officials are going into the stands, I was told, even at non-Astros exhibition games, to take signs away from customers that are, of course, anti-Astro.
Well, how can they do that?
I don't know. I didn't see that specifically. I was just told there was an article that talked about not only Astros home games, but Astros road exhibition games now, that's happening. And, you have all kinds of freedom of speech issues, et cetera. But I have a feeling at the visiting parks when the season starts, I find it hard to believe they're going to be confiscating signs because everybody outside of Houston is unilaterally against what these guys did. I don't know how they didn't think the pushback was going to be like this or worse. You don't want people to get death threats, but Astros are getting death threats, and that's a little over the top. But you know what, Bob? Nobody ever sat in a room and said, well, let's see if this cheating plays out and it's discovered what's going to happen. And A, they got no punishment from baseball, zero. And B, now you're going to get the backlash of, frankly, I think, millions of fans. And we haven't even talked about the gamblers who probably lost millions on the Yankees and the Dodgers that year.
Let me just say this, and I have unfortunate news in terms of my own psyche. But I do believe this. I think that I love baseball, too, as you know. But I think that fans that go to a lot of games are suckers, and they don't do what they should do. If they can't hold up a sign when they go, they should boycott the game.
I'm bringing a trash can to Citi Field.
You are? No, but I'm serious. I'm a sucker for hockey, but also I can't afford it to go to NHL games anymore. I won't go to baseball because I go to minor league games because it's not worth the hassle and the seats are horrible. You can't afford a good seat. Why would I want? I may as well go watch people walk on the moon than go to. I was shocked. I finally went to a major league game at Citi Field 2 years ago. I've been in airplanes that flew lower. Why would I go?
That's the problem nowadays, Bob. You've probably seen, and I can tell you this: when I was a very little kid, my father worked in the post office, and he got season tickets to the Rangers when the new Garden opened, 69, 70, around there.
67.
And we actually got to go to the Garden to look at our maybe seats. I was a little kid, but It was $4 for the first row of the blue seats and $3 for the second row. And he worked at the post office, so we got the second row. I took my son to a game a couple of years ago. I sat 10 rows from the ice, which I've never done in my whole life. And the price of that ticket, I understand there's a big differential in dates then, cost more than a season ticket for the Rangers in like the 70s, when the Rangers were really good, by the way, as you know. And so it's really, baseball's become unaffordable. We used to go to Yankee Stadium for $1, $1.50. We go 30 times a year. And now you can't go. I always took my kids to 2 or 3 games for everything, hockey, basketball, baseball, and an occasional football game. But now you're right, it's unaffordable, and don't forget how good the TV coverage is nowadays compared to 30, 40 years ago.
Oh, my goodness, absolutely. And again, now where I'm a hypocrite is in the early 70s, I was ahead of myself career-wise. I made pretty decent money when I started out, relative to the time. And so I used to go and see the scalpers in front of the Garden and pay $27 for a $25 glass seat. But I got glass seats to the game. It was $27, and I was an addict, and I was the way the fans I would criticize now. But I have to admit, they never gave me any reason to boycott. But if and this is out of love for the fans, if I am a regular fan and I bring a sign and some jackass came to me and wanted to take that sign out, he better be prepared to fight.
Well, we'll see what happens, because that's going to happen when the season starts.
Well, then the people, what they should do, but they won't, and they should just say, we're not going to the game. We're going to boycott the game. And fans need a union, let me tell you. Whether it's to buy a beer or a hot dog, it's gotten totally out of hand. What else do you think is happening regarding to Houston? We have a problem.
Well, in this thing that we shot yesterday, Janelle's right. We went to Iona College. They have an incredible, tech/studio that we filmed in. Anthony Sabinelli's a graduate student there, who's actually going to start working for the NBA in a few weeks, so good for him. But it was so professionally done, I think it will be an improvement, not that the other ones aren't good. But what he can do that we haven't been able to do, for example, I did a whole bunch of things about home versus road 2017 playoff stats. Mm-hmm. And when you see that up on the screen, because he's going to put the whole thing up on the screen, I'll give you one example. Altuve, the difference between his home and away stats in the playoffs that year, he hit like 472 at home and I think it was 250 on the road. But I did it for Correa and Altuve and Bregman, and I do remember Brian McCann, who I liked a lot. He's briefly in New York. Mm-hmm. He hit 037 on the road and 300 at home in all his playoff games in 2017. I also did team stuff, and all that's going to be up on a chart while I'm talking about what happened. Yeah. But when you look at the stats, they are so. We always know, generally speaking, you hit better at home. We understand that, but this is so different, so far apart.
Now, did you?
There can be little doubt in my mind that there was something going on.
Now, one of the things some other wonk is doing is looking at now, we've talked about this, and my eyes frost over, but it matters. That Garrett Cole, and he was defending himself the other day because he was with Houston at the time. After he joined Houston, his spin rate went from, I'm making this up, but proportionality, I'm probably on the money.
2,000 rotations per second to 2,500 per second.
Something like, thank you. Now, do you think a pitcher really can control that? I'm going to throw this pitch, and it's going to be so many RPMs. I mean, are we being over-analytical, or is there something to this?
I think there's something to spin rate. I will say this, even when Verlander went over there, and remember, Verlander had not been great when he went over there. Yeah. I don't know if it's something the pitching coach teaches you to increase spin rate, but generally speaking, the Astros have, but that then leads to what you were talking about before. Were they able somehow to put something on the ball to unbalance it and make the spin rate higher? I just don't know the answer, but I do know, especially with Verlander, he became a superstar again. He was not a superstar at Detroit the last few years before he went to Houston, and then he became like the old Verlander, if you will. So I think there's going to be more judging about that. I don't know what the evidence is, but there was a general view, and people talked about it, that the spin rate of a pitcher when you went from wherever to the Astros did go up.
Wow, my goodness. Well, they're never, how are they going to get to the bottom of special stuff you put on the ball? I mean, I know that
I think
every
baseball
team...
baseball wants it to go away. I mean, Manfred wants it to be over. He's a dreamer.
Jake,
There's 81 road games this year.
Let's
But
see if Cole is a
I won't say
dominant.
they swept it under the carpet because obviously they did the investigation. But the notion in the report that in 2019 the Astros stopped cheating because they didn't think it was effective anymore.
Baloney.
Just look at the stats from 2017 and you'll see how hard to believe it is. And Manfred's position was when asked about it, well, they told us the truth about 2017. They told us the truth about 2018. Why would they lie about 2019?
Did you see?
And the answer is they wanted to contain it to 1 year or 1 year and a little bit. That's the answer to me,
Apropos
anyway.
of this, another major league representative was saying, "Well, cheating is a part of pro sports. People are always trying to cheat."
Well, yeah, if you steal a sign with your eyes, absolutely.
Jake, you were going to say?
No, I think it's easy for the Astros. Go out, win the pennant. Garrett Cole go win the Cy Young. You'll quiet everyone down.
Okay, need to go to another story before we let you go, although we also want you to hang around as I embarrass myself, or at least I do well with my picks, and we see what's on Jake's mind. Brady, in fact, this is a good way for you to comment and for Jake to segue in. Of course, Jake Schaefer, his football picks have been relegated to Bob Marrone's hockey picks during this time of the year, and it's brought to you by Dominic's Fine Cigars, licensed retailer with a big selection, including Arturo Fuente, Padrones, and more. Dominic's Fine Cigars, located on Boston Post Road in Larchmont. Gentlemen, Tom Brady, is this all to do about nothing? The pundits this morning were ripping, not so much Brady per se, but the notion that he's going anywhere. What say you, Jake? Then Steve, let's get your comment.
Seeming more and more like he actually might leave, which I would not have bet on, but if you were to put a gun to my head, I would say, yeah, he's probably a 51% chance that he's going to leave.
So you put a gun to my head, I'd say no, one of us is going to die. Jake, you're the tiebreaker. Steve, you're the tiebreaker.
Well, I never thought that Brady would leave the Patriots, but I'll say this. If he's going to leave at 43, I think that's a mistake because he's going to have to go somewhere. To me, he has fallen off a little. I don't think as much as other people say. He had very few weapons at New England this year. He did not have Gronkowski, which is as big a loss as you could possibly have, not only because he's a great tight end, but because he's a great blocker. So I don't know where he's going to go. Maybe the Titans, where, his old teammate Mike Vrabel is the coach. But if he goes to, in my opinion, San Diego or Las Vegas now, the Raiders, or someplace like that, I think he has no chance to win the Super Bowl. I think he wants to prove he can win. And, oh, by the way, he's going to hurt Belichick pretty badly unless they go out and sign like Phillip Rivers if he goes somewhere else. So I still think the best thing for him, if he wants to win another Super Bowl, is to stay in New England, and I will still be surprised if he leaves. And if he does leave, you remember this, Bob, Joe Namath in what, a Rams uniform, Montana
it was
in
incongruous.
a Chiefs uniform, Walt Frazier in a Cavaliers uniform. It's like dreaded memories that I have.
No, I understand. It would be like you know what I could never imagine? You just really clued my mind. I can't even imagine Sandy Koufax not wearing a Dodger uniform.
Exactly.
I can't.
Exactly.
My brain would melt. I just can't do it. What about you, Jake?
Well, it just seems, Brett Favre wore 2 different jerseys after the Packers. Just seems
And he actually was
the
halfway
way it
decent
goes
as
now.
it died out.
Yeah,
But
and I think Brady will be halfway decent if he goes to the Chargers. I think if they offer him a piece of the team, why not?
Well, what about this whole business that was started yesterday with the New York Giants? Jake, you came in. We didn't go with the story because you said you wanted to check it out a little bit. But what did you hear early yesterday?
I just heard an ESPN report yesterday morning that said that the Giants were one of the teams interested in on Brady, which surprises me. But they haven't been the new Giants regime has not been all that supportive of Daniel Jones. They have not called him their starting quarterback yet.
Why, Steve, why do you think that is?
Well, I think because Joe Judge is like playing it right down the middle so far. He doesn't look. Whatever you think of Daniel Jones, he had a good first few games, and then the league got to know him. Then he became a turnover machine. I think the jury is still out. Gettleman has to pump him because the only reason Gettleman has his job is he's pitching that his new quarterback is a franchise quarterback. But it wouldn't hurt him to play a year behind Tom Brady or even 2 years behind Tom Brady, because it doesn't look like to me he walked right in and was, I don't know, Dan Marino or Patrick Mahomes after a year on the bench or someone like that. And you can't be wrong on the quarterbacks, because if you're wrong on the quarterbacks, you cost your franchise, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, or whatever. So the jury's out on Daniel Jones, in my opinion. I don't think Brady's coming to the Giants because I think he looks at them and goes, am I going to win a Super Bowl with this team? But that's just my personal opinion.
All right, speaking of personal opinions, it's time. It's time. Jake's picks of the week relegated to Bob's hockey picks of the week while the football season's in cessation. Of course, as baseball winds up, Jake will be doing his picks. But what he does now is he holds my feet to the fire, Steven. So,
not relegated, Bob. You're making money for everybody if they're following.
Well, they should be. Jake, yesterday, put me through my paces. Jake, how did I do last night? I'm ready to take my folks.
You've taken the lead in your contest with young intern Nick.
Nick, did I spray him with a can of whip butt?
You were 7-3 last night.
7-3.
Wow.
Against 5-5 to bring the totals. You've picked one more game than him, so you're 23-13.
Which three did I lose? How did that happen?
And he is 21-14.
Some of my dogs won last night, didn't they? Woof 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 woof.
So you're on a nice little roll. Are you going to keep it going tonight?
Oh God, yes.
I spoke with intern Nick. He does not like the long slates. He doesn't like the big slate games.
He must be a millennial.
So I think
what's the matter? He doesn't like a big set. Too much information. I got to sleep till noon, and I can only talk 2 games. No wonder he's a loser. Big L. Does he have a shirt with an L on it?
Tonight there's only 5 games, so
I'm
might
ready to
favor
go.
him.
Come on, let's go. Come on. What's my record again? Give me this.
23-13.
Wow.
Not with any point spread though, so he can just take the favorites
13,
anytime he wanted.
23-13. Just so people. All right, go ahead.
All right. This will be interesting. Flyers at home against the Rangers.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, okay. See, here's the problem that I have, Steve. Maybe you can give me some mental
Flyers
help.
significant favorites.
I know. I don't like to root against the team I root for. We'll be back to that.
All right.
I'll make a decision.
Blue Jackets at home against the Wild.
Yeah, the Wild are probably give me the Jackets. They're due for a win, but the Wild's been playing well. I won with them yesterday. Go ahead.
Hurricanes at home against the Avalanche.
Avalanche.
Penguins on the road favored at the Ducks.
As well they should be.
Big favorites.
Yeah, go.
And the Golden Knights at home, huge favorites against the Sabres.
I'm going to go with the Sabres.
Wow, if this one comes through, I'm going to buy you a Coke. You got to go back to the Flyers Rangers, though. Steve, give him a hand.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I can help you with Flyers Rangers. The Rangers have won their last 9 on the road, franchise record, 9-1 in their last 10 games. I think you should just have a blanket pick the Rangers whenever they're on the road, and right now pick the Rangers wherever they are.
But have you seen?
Shesterkin got hurt in that car accident. He broke a rib. But this Georgiev is very, very good, and I feel a little bad for Lundqvist. Because I don't think he's been playing at all, and they didn't trade him. Not that he wanted to go, but I think the Rangers are the hottest team. They're 2 points out of the playoff spot
but
now,
if you look
Bob.
at the Flyers, the Flyers are red hot too. They've won like 10 of their last 11.
I'm rolling with the Rangers.
I'm going to roll with the Rangers, but the only reason I'm doing it, and this
you're
is,
a Ranger fan.
Yeah, and I just don't want to be watching it and root against them. But I may be sacrificing a win here, because if they come out against tonight, the way they came out last night, they're going to get their butts kicked in. The Rangers still are young, and they make and by the way, who I'm upset with? Let me get this off my chest. 2 days after he signs a contract, Kreider takes a day off. And that's always been the knock on him. You couldn't. He kind of came halfway to life, but he didn't make one rush last night. Not one.
Well, you have to worry when these guys, it's still true today, I think, in every sport, you have to worry when these guys sign gigantic contracts. Do they go home that night and say, man, I'm set for life? Or do they go home and say, man, I got to dig in because I just signed a gigantic contract? I'm not saying that's Kreider, but I think you're right. I think that's almost what got him traded, frankly. He kind of just disappeared at times. But he's, incredible speed, talented guy, having a great year, and I think it's good that they have him. But you're right. You got to see what his motivation is. Is he going to go out there and kill himself every night, as he should?
I mean, I can't believe he took the night off again. And that's always been my beef. My grandson and I argue about him all the time because when he tries, he is uber. I mean, he's like a monster. He's not human. Have you ever seen, either of you guys, the video of him jumping out of a pool?
I have not.
I have not seen that, no.
Think of that. You're in a pool with the water up above your waist.
I saw Bo Jackson do it.
And you jump out of it. It's ridiculous. Now, something else I want to recommend to both of you gentlemen. Couldn't sleep last night, clicked on something, and MSNBC Sports had on a documentary of how Connor McDavid came back from tendon tears. He tore his knee up at the end of last season. When you see what this guy did to rehab, and then you see him rehabbing on the ice, you absolutely, realize he's not human either. No, but totally not human. He's from another universe. But when you see the rehabbing and what he does, because people say, how can someone be that extraordinary? What a work ethic.
Where did you see that, Bob?
NBC Sports had this thing called Whatever It Takes for Connor McDavid. And you must watch it. Find it.
Okay, if I could say one more thing about hockey, because I know Janelle was talking to you about the Houston Astros stuff, which I think is really good. But the other video I shot yesterday, and it was, like 4 days late because it was after the 40th anniversary of the USA beating Russia. But if you listen to that, Bob, you will love it because there were a number of things. I'll give you one example, which you'll remember. 2 weeks before the Olympics, Russia played the U.S. at Madison Square Garden. And if you had season tickets, which we did at the time, again, Section 441, Row B, seats 1 and 2, they're now luxury boxes at the other side of the remaining blue seats. You could go to that game, and we went to that game, and Russia beat them 10-3.
Yeah, they got their asses kicked.
And it wasn't even that close.
Yeah.
So I have 5 or 6 things there that I didn't think, like I think Mark Johnson was the MVP of that game, not Maruzioni, not Jim Craig. He scored the goal where they pulled Tradiak.
I agree
and he scored the goal in the third period to tie up the game 1 minute and 21 seconds before Maruzioni. But I talked about 5 or 6 things in that game that you will find fascinating if you're a hockey guy, and I know you're a hockey guy.
Now,
so that'll be up, I think, sometime today. That's up to my boss. I think I am still a minion. I'm not sure, though, but I'll find out and let you know next week.
I can put in the good word, and then she'll just tell me where to go. Hey, let me ask you about something. Don't go yet.
But you should check that out when it's up later today at Steve Callis. Speaking of sports, you'll put it up, or WestchesterCountyPost.com more likely. But you'll love it because it's just, again, 5 or 6 things. People, Maltsev hit the post after Maruzioni scored what proved to be the game winner.
I remember
stuff like that really wasn't discussed
I got something else for you.
In my opinion.
Hold the phone. Now, I know I'm older than you. Now, Jake, I'm much older than you, and I want you both to be kind. The 1971 series with Russia was one of the most extraordinary sporting events I have ever watched. Now, were you alive yet, Stephen? Or how old were you in 71?
I was certainly alive. That's the one where Paul Henderson scored in the last game to win the series?
They had players on that team. In fact, one of them now is up for the Hall of Fame, Mikhailov.
He was,
Oh, my God.
And he was on the Eddie team, too, as you know. He was awesome.
They have to put that guy in the Hall of Fame. Maltsev. When I saw those Russians, and it took another 10 years, as you now know, before they really got integrated into the NHL.
Right.
What an extraordinary group of hockey players they were. And
I think it was more a coach problem, frankly, than a Russian problem, than a player problem.
Yeah, it was. They should have left Tradiak in the net, but it just the greatest thing to happen to hockey in my lifetime was the inclusion of Europeans, and if it wasn't for the WHA, it would have been another 10 years delay.
Right.
So. By the way, we're going to be starting a show soon called PodHockey.com. I do hope you'll be a guest on it.
Oh, I'd love to. My dad was a hockey lifer from the 20s and 30s with the Rangers when they were awesome. You'll recall their first 2 cups in the late 20s and early 30s. And someday I will show you, Bob. I have a scrapbook. When my father was in high school, he was told to do a scrapbook of a current event, and he did the 1933 Stanley Cup playoffs, which the Rangers won the cup. So I'll bring that to you, and you'll just get lost in it for like a week.
Well, you should come in one of these days. All right, Steve Callis, thank you very much. What are you doing this weekend?
I'm going to be on Sunday night with Joe Stazak in Philly at 8:10 p.m. I'll put it up on the Facebook page. And speaking of sports, and I'm going to do a podcast later today with Joe Stazak of 97.5 The Fanatic down in Philly, and that'll be up at Westchester County Post later today or tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen Callis. Jake, you're still here, obviously. Jake, what about, we don't talk enough about it. Can the Knicks ever get out of their own way? Is there any hope for them?
They just got to tear it all down. Terrible drafting.
Like the Rangers did.
Last 5 years, terrible drafting. I don't know how this kid from Duke is going to turn out. He's struggling right now, but the last 3 or 4 drafts are first-round picks. They had one nice pick in a later first round, or might have been an early second-round pick. Their center, Mitchell Robinson, looks like a decent player that they might be able to make one of the pieces moving forward, but they just need to tear it all down, lose as many games as they can, get as many draft picks, do what the Rangers did.
But that's, one of the things, and I look at sports and I realize it's a lot like business. And one of the mantras that a lot of good executives I worked for, and when I became one, I used to say, do it any one way consistently for a while, give it a chance to work. And it seems like every other year the Nets have a new GM, the Knicks rather, they have a new coach. They change the types of players they have. And I guess maybe because only 5 are on the floor, where in hockey all 20 play. Is there any, for example, what would have happened if we left Phil Jackson there, even though he got off to a bad start? Might they be better?
No, I think they'd be similar to where they are now. Phil Jackson didn't care about his job. He took the money. He didn't seem like he was paying too much attention. He didn't go on the road with the team. It'll be interesting next year because the Nets are going to be great next year, and the Nets are going to own the back pages of our local newspapers, and it'll be interesting to see how Dolan, that'll be the first time that has happened when they're just buried. In the Nets, they've got Durant, they've got Irving, he'll be healthy and he'll be motivated to play with Durant. The Nets will be a title contender, and the Knicks will be a joke. So maybe then Dolan will.
What do you know about this guy Rose, who's taken over the Knicks now? This agent, and do you agree with that dynamic of picking an agent to be a GM? Is it really all about relationships in the NBA now?
It seems like in the NBA, yes. It hasn't really worked for the Mets so far with Brody, but it does seem like in the NBA it's all kind of a clique. If you're good friends with LeBron, if you're in his circle of friends, you'll pair off. He'll take 2 of his friends, give them to another team. So the idea in the NBA is to get 2 or 3 superstars on a team and build around them. So I think the Knicks, that's what their goal is, have this agent who knows all these players, friends with them, get a couple guys to come in, play in New York. But it's not the attraction it used to be. No one really cares about the Garden.
Well, they would care about the Garden if it seems to me they had a chance to win, or if there was stability. Everybody in hockey wants to come to New York, and as much as I love hockey, it still doesn't have the cachet and never will of basketball in a big city. It's remarkable to me. It really is, and I can't see why they just don't get one good man or woman. I don't care who it is. There's a couple of NBA coaches that are women now. Bring someone in who is going to be dedicated but allowed to do what they do.
Well, that was the plan with Jackson. They gave Jackson full autonomy, and
I think you're right. I think he checked out because he's too smart a guy and too good a basketball man. And one of the rules of coaching is, in fact, it cost the guy in Toronto his job, speaking of hockey, is you coach the team you have. You don't put in a system that doesn't fit their skill set. And he was trying to let them do this triangle offense, which was already obsolete by the time he came in. How long has the three-point shot been so important?
Well, it's always been important, but now it just dominates the game ever since the Warriors with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. They just did the analytics of it, and they said, well, if we make 42% of these, it's a lot smarter to take, 40 shots instead of 25 a game. You do the math. If we can make 42%, makes a lot more sense to just chuck the threes than to settle for an inside or mid-range game.
Now, I have a blind spot when it comes to basketball.
But I think they should move back the three-point line.
Yeah, I think they should too, or maybe even do away with it. I think.
No, they can't do away with it, but they should significantly move it back, I think.
Now,
they did that in college, and college is exciting this year.
Since analytics has become so important, now I realize I'm dating myself, but back in the 70s and 80s, guys shot 95% from the foul line. In fact, even in high school, we used to make the players take 100 foul shots, 100 every day. In the NBA, that dropped off. Is it back yet, or do we still have mediocre foul shooters?
Well, there's just not that much attention to it. It's all, instead of practicing free throws, it's three-point shots. Everyone shoots threes, centers, everyone. That's what they're taught.
Who's your team in the NBA? Do you have
I'd like to root for the Nets. I don't really have a team, though.
Have to get you a net hat.
I like a lot of the Eastern Conference teams. I like the Bucks. They're fun to watch.
What happened to San Francisco? They from the perennial power. Was it just
Golden State?
Yeah, Golden State.
Injuries. They lost their two shooters. Steph Curry, he's coming back, and I think next week he'll be back. But they lost Klay Thompson. Steph Curry, Draymond Green has not played a lot this year, but they'll be back. They're going to have a nice draft pick.
Oh, okay. Because Kerr just brought that team to the next level, and they played so well. It bothered me that all of a sudden I saw them in last place.
Yeah, they'll be the same team next year, but with a top 5 draft pick as well, so they'll be back.
Are there any prodigies coming up in the NBA? We all knew when LeBron was coming, a couple of other players.
The draft, the NBA draft coming up, which of course the Knicks will probably get the first pick, but it's not a good draft. There's not really. The one interesting player is remember Ball.
Well, I'm just going to ask you about the ball.
Melo
how
Ball.
many balls are there? I mean, how many? There's like
Lonzo
a family
plays for. He's in the league now. He's a decent point guard. The father is a nutcase.
Yeah, but that we know. He's a real stage dad.
He sent his son LaMelo, 6'8" point guard. He sent him to Australia so he could get paid. But he's coming to the NBA next year, and he might be the first pick. And he's someone that the Knicks are very interested in.
Is he a game changer? I mean, is he going to make $50 million a year like a LeBron? Is he going to be?
He won't be a LeBron. He won't be a top tier, but he could be an all-star.
I remember when LeBron was in high school, they couldn't wait for him. I mean, we haven't seen that in so long. Although you know what I'm always going to remember, and I told some kids at the high school hockey team I was advising that a guy like Jordan was cut from his high school team. Never forget that.
And Jordan played 3 years in college. He played till his junior year. You'll never see that again.
Well, now aren't they drafting out of high school now? I heard, in fact, this guy, was it Rose? It may have been Rose or some other agent. They really try and advise teams against bringing kids in from high school.
Well, they're going to change that rule in a couple of years.
You think so?
No, you're not allowed to jump from high school to the NBA now. You have to play at least 1 year in college.
Oh, okay.
But they're going to get rid of that rule. You can go from the high school to the NBA.
Well,
I think
that's what
in 2
he
years.
said. But what he said was from the turn of development. I think from the standpoint of a free market, I think they have every right to play. But he said that that's actually hurting players. That guys are getting into bad habits and they never recover, and you never really know. Whereas, I don't know if you're aware of this. Division I hockey, you can't go to Division I school straight out of high school. Very rare. What they encourage them to do, because it's become so competitive, really like the pro game now, they have you go to one of these so-called junior leagues, which really is top-level semi-pro for young people. They have you go play 2 years of junior because they want you to have a man's body when you go to Division I.
Well, that makes sense for hockey or the NFL, where you have to play 3. You have to be a junior to declare for the NFL. That makes sense. I think in basketball, you can get away with being a little more spindly.
Yeah, I guess. But
sit on the bench, go to the G League. It makes sense to me.
Have you been to any of the G League games yet?
No.
You should take a trip up to the
Westchester
They're
Knicks.
good. Yeah, they're very good. In fact, that's where I ran into Steve Miller when I was doing pre-games I guess I did about 5 or 6 pre-games there. And so, you get there early for the gig. And he'd be, basketball shoot-arounds usually, you come, you do your layups, and the fans come in, and then you have a little shoot-around, and the game starts. Well, this guy, Steve Miller, he was running
great
drills.
Singer.
No, he was running Mike Miller, sorry. He was running drills and working. He was working with this one guy. I forget his name now. And he had this guy come down the floor, take the ball out of the corner, fake, and shoot. He must have had to do it 50 times. Must have had him do it 50 times. Run down, fake to the inside, go to the outside, take a pass from down by what we used to call not the key, from the side. I forget what that was called, from the corner, and then put it up. Unbelievable. This guy worked his butt off. I'm so glad he got to the NBA, even if just for a little while. All right, Jake, anything else on your mind before we send you on your way?
Well, I looked up the XFL ratings for last weekend. First 2 weekends, they were around a 4 share, which is very, very good. They dropped to a 2.5 average for the 4 games. It was around a 2.5 average. I think the high was around a 3. And people are starting to get worried about that. But when you compare it to college basketball ratings, only one game was over a 1.44, and that was the Kansas-Baylor game, 2 top 5 teams in the country. They did a 1.88. In the NBA's primetime showcase game, Saturday night game was the 76ers against the Bucks, which is a big-ticket game. That was only a 1.7. So overall, I think the XFL is doing pretty good.
It is doing
It'll be
pretty good.
interesting to see how they do this coming week, because the NFL is now back in the news with the combine and the upcoming draft. So it'll be interesting to see how much it falls in the weeks to come.
Does the combine matter that much? Or is it really just to promote the game?
I think it's just to promote the game.
Because there are guys that don't go to the combine.
And you see these guys that have these incredible, runs around the cones,
I saw that,
and they end up being top 5 picks because this guy could get around cones a lot faster than anyone else, and then he comes to the league and he's terrible. So
some have called my hockey playing me being a cone at this age.
Yeah, it's interesting. The top quarterback prospect, they measured his hands, and he has small hands, so now everyone's worried about him.
Oh my goodness! Well, Wayne Gretzky, if he had to do a combine, wouldn't have made the NHL.
They said Tom Brady was the most physically unimpressive person to ever go to a combine.
You never know. If you ever get a look at Gretzky when he started, it must have been 155 pounds. His shot is good, but not hard. His skating is very good, elite, but not great. His puck handling is extraordinary, but he just put it all together in a way you just, it's hard to figure out. All righty, Jake's picks.
I'll try and get a copy of the Wonderlic test. That's the test they give to all the combine participants.
It's a verbal test?
Supposedly Dan Marino has one of the lowest scores in the history of the NFL combine.
What kind of questions do they ask you?
It's just mental acuity, I think. So see if we can get us a copy of it and see how we do.
Jake's segment, as always, it's called Jake's Picks of the Week, but right now it's Bob's Hockey Picks for the Week, and I just want to remind you, Bob is 23-13. My goodness, I'm an investment. And this week's Jake Schaefer segment was brought to you by Dominic's Fine Cigars, licensed retailer with a big selection, including Arturo Fuente Patrons and more. Dominic's Fine Cigars, located on Boston Post Road in Larchmont. They're open 7 days. We've got a lot to catch up to. The weather, some sponsors, and coming on at 8:35, of course, will be Dr. Victor Sternberg. We'll be talking about the coronavirus. And then a few minutes after 9 o'clock, MSNBC legal and political analyst Mimi Rocha will be joining us in studio. She's running for district attorney now. So instead of being on TV, she'll be on our air for about an hour or so, or a little less than that probably. She's got to take care of some business. She's probably going to get here about 9:10. So Mimi Rocha will be with us today. What an interesting background. She spent several years as the assistant attorney in the prosecutor's office in the federal prosecutor's office here in the Southern District. She now teaches at Pace College, a very vocal critic of the president. In fact, made news back in 2018 when she suggested, she didn't affirm it, but she suggested that looking at the legal relationship between President Trump and Paul Manafort reminded her of some of the legal relationships that took place in organized crime. One of her specialties when she was in the Southern District, the assistant prosecutor there, was in charge of organized crime. So why she's running, what she thinks she brings to the table. One of the things in a quote that we saw yesterday was that she wants the job because of what she sees coming out of the White House. So real Trump-centered candidate. All righty, let's go and take a look at the weather first, and then we'll catch up on a few other things, including the great Dr. Victor Sternberg. It is 32 degrees. It's not going to get up much above 38 today. Now, it's sunny right now, but they're telling us that sun will turn to clouds. Tonight, though, it'll clear up again. The temperature getting down to about 24. The wind out of the west, 10 to 15 miles an hour. Saturday, that's tomorrow, if you don't count. Partly sunny and breezy, 36 degrees. A little breezy. That's 25 mile per hour gusts. On Sunday, mostly sunny. A high of 40 degrees, and the overnight low will be 29. And the weather's brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. This segment, upcoming segment with Dr. Sternberg, is brought to you by Aging Issues Management, their partners, Aging Issues Radio, the law firm of Payne & Kahn, and Plug-in Virtual Reality. Now, if you're interested in advertising, and I don't talk about this enough, I should, you may be hearing from me directly, give us a call at 914-727-2726, 914-272-2726. You know, a little earlier, Steve Callis was talking about using studios with green screens. We implemented ours fully this week and already did about 6 shows using the green screen, and that means we can create any studio environment you want. We have very, very reasonable rates to rent the studio, and we do all the technical work here. So once again, 914-727-2726. And let's get back to where we're at. Again, our top story this morning. Go ahead, I'm going to punch the shoot out of this machine. All right, you don't want to do it? See, folks, this is yesterday. Was it yesterday, Jake, that you said, what machine do I want to break? See, now I'm pressing this button. There it goes. Now it works. I'll use my giant thumb. All right. Dr. Sternberg should be with us directly. Can do by phone. Well, this is going to be fun. It is 8:35. We just got a couple of messages in and some programming changes, but this is all to the good because we can open up the telephones now. 914-999-4006, 914-999-4006. Dr. Sternberg has taken ill, and he can't be with us this morning. And we just heard that Mimi Roca may run late, so what we're going to do is have her call in, Jake. And that's never a bad thing. The phone is just as well as a call-in, and by the time they find the parking lot here, we wind up with all kinds of issues. So we're going to play some music, do a little bit of a reset, and we'll be right back with you. This is Radio Westchester. If you'd like to join the conversation, give us a call at 914-222-3141 or 914-999-4006. 999-4006, 999-4006. I'd love to get some feedback on the conversation we've had with Richard Thomas earlier in the news that the controller of the state of New York's finally coming in to deal with the financial irregularities, or what appear to be financial irregularities, in Mount Vernon. And we also would like to hear what you think about whether or not we actually will have a Joe Biden candidacy, and as well the scandal. What would you do if you were in the stands at a Met game, or you were in the stands at a Yankee game and holding up a sign saying that Houston should be thrown out of baseball, and someone came to took the sign away from you? What would you have to say about that? 914-222-3141, 914-222-3141, or 914-999-4006. Again, 914-222-3141, 914-222-3141. Actually, A.J. Woodson may be calling it as well. Okay, Mimi Roca, who is also tied up this morning. We did a little bit of producing there. We're going to have Mimi Roca call in, and we do have one caller coming in on the hotline now, and actually someone who we would hope would call in. He's usually with us Tuesdays or Wednesdays, but A.J. Woodson, we want to get his reaction to the story we did earlier today with Richard Thomas. Why? We're trying to understand why it is that the comptroller has finally agreed to come into Mount Vernon and look into that issue. So we're going to do that, and then we hope that we got back to Mimi Roca's people properly, and that we can do that. So you just stay right there. This is the one and only Radio Westchester. Nothing like live radio to keep you going. I didn't want to just dominate it. I have so many issues to talk about. You will get sick of me, but this is a call that we were hoping to get. And this is from, one of our favorite people, A.J. Woodson. He's the managing editor and publisher of Black Westchester magazine, and we want to get his take on the latest news out of Mount Vernon. Good morning, A.J. How are you?
Hey, Bob. It's not AJ, and it's Mike Duffy. I tricked you.
Hey, but that's okay. I'm glad you did. Thank you very much. What's going on?
Nothing. I just, I'm interested in Miss Rocha's appearance. I don't have a dog in that fight, but I was just curious what her thoughts are as far as Westchester County issues go for the DA, as opposed to, I know she's a spokesperson for a contributor for MSNBC, and she talks about mostly national issues. So I was just really not concerned, but curious as to what her stance is as far as what Westchester needs as far as enforcement goes by the DA.
I think that's a good question, and I'm glad that you posed it. I know I did my research last night, Counselor, and I remind people Mike Duffy is a regular part of our entourage. He's a defense attorney, but he also has been the head of prosecutions, or investigations rather, for the DA's office here in Westchester County, and he also has been a cop on the beat, a detective, and so forth. Those are good questions, because when we did our homework, what we discovered was someone who has some real issues with Trump and how she feels he has managed his office, etc. And she famously was part of a story back in 2018 that intimated, and that's the best word I can use, she can speak for herself, that intimated that some of the relationships that the president's lawyers had with Manafort's lawyers in terms of exchanging information reminded her, and again, intimated this, of what mobsters have done in the past. And again, her job in the U.S. Attorney's Office was organized crime, and it got her some press. But we were going to ask about that. But basically, she's running because of the direction that the country's headed in. So your question is really well taken.
Yeah, I mean, it's a local office, so I'm interested in local issues. But also, I think Ms. Rocha was in the DOJ and she was in AUSA when Ted Stevens was convicted. And, there was a lot of prosecutorial misconduct by the U.S. Attorney's Office in that case. In fact, several individuals were investigated by the judge in that case. They failed to turn over exculpatory material. So, but mostly I'm interested in the local aspect. So that's all. That's why I wanted to pipe up and give you a holler.
Well, I'm glad that you did. By the way, I was thinking of you this morning. I did a story where a guy had 144 arrests.
Yeah, I'm in my office working early this morning. That did pop up on my phone. I saw that.
You must have known that I was going to go there. You probably said, Bob's probably squawking already, and I was. Hey, you know what's interesting? A.J. Woodson was trying to get in too, but you beat him to the punch, but he'll be calling back in a moment. I consider it a good habit, and it's antithetical to doing news. But when a story didn't add up the first time and it comes back, I like to revisit it with a vengeance. Now, you already know what happened with this lawyer and rather with this, not the lawyer, not Picaro, but with Richard Thomas in Mount Vernon when he couldn't get the bills paid by the comptroller. Mm-hmm. Went to court. Court ordered her to open up the books. She still didn't. He begged the comptroller to come in. I saw memos. We foiled stuff. Saw documents to the governor, to the comptroller, to everybody and their grandmother. And they finally came in for a day and then looked at the books for a little bit and then said, "Oh, we got to go. It's an emergency." And by the way, they literally said this: "Don't bother cleaning out the office we were going to use because we ain't coming back." So this guy winds up resigning because of, and again, there's no two ways about it. His campaign finance was not done right, and he pled out, and it'll be expunged and be able to run for office again in a year if he follows his probation. But he left.
Right. Well, it won't be expunged. New York doesn't expunge.
But whatever. What's the right word? But whatever it is, he's allowed
I understand
to.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
He'll be able to. His restriction will be up as far as running.
Right. Thank you very much. See, that's why you're here. But no, for real. But also why you're here is what always bothered me about this is this guy made some mistakes, and I make no apologies for him or those mistakes. But he went down in flames with begging for oversight, begging to understand why the comptroller wouldn't pay bills. And we've always given her the benefit of the doubt and say she's either a hero or a villain. So now the new mayor comes in, and the same stuff starts all over again with her. And finally, the the comptroller is coming in. And see, I don't like to let these stories die. Like, one of the records I foiled is like this number, and I'm not making it up. There's like a $95 million debit in one of their accounts for the Urban Renewal Agency.
Mm-hmm.
And what got Richard in a lot of trouble was he kept saying, hey, who made these loans? What are the terms? Why don't we just write it off? That kind of stuff. What I'm saying is the injustice that you see, and you must see more. Now, I'm not saying Richard Thomas is any angel, but why finally do we get the comptroller coming in now? What changed?
I don't know, but, there's been so much malfeasance in Mount Vernon through the year, as long as I can remember, quite frankly. And the state agencies don't like to step in. They don't like to step on people's toes. There's politics involved.
Well, that's my point.
It just, my humble opinion, Mount Vernon definitely needed, I don't know if they need it now with the new administration, but they definitely needed the state oversight there to see what was going on, because it was so entrenched what was going on there. And, there's no good solutions, but the state really, in my opinion, should have jumped in there a long time ago and evaluated the situation.
Well, we've been screaming about it for a year, at least I have, because you can tell that something was not right, and only because of the particular perch we had. Now, you joined us way back when I was on FAS, and Richard Thomas at that time ran on the very issues that killed him. It's very kind of remarkable. He ran on Memorial Field having been a corrupt dumping ground and let's getting it fixed. And he ran on the basis of we need fiscal transparency. and even, like, I guess it was a few months ago when finally the thing got sorted. Now, Richard, I didn't think handled it well at time when he was managing it, but nonetheless, he's the guy that put the Memorial Field on the front page. And so finally, after all the fighting, he died on the parapet. And the interim mayor was spiking the ball when the county. I mean, I know that politics isn't fair, but man, it eats people alive.
Well, the whole Memorial Field thing was horrible, because you and I remember it from years ago. But I'm glad Mr. Latimer stepped in there.
Yep.
I'm glad the county stepped in, and hopefully that's a solution to the problem, the recent agreement they've reached, and maybe we can regain Memorial Field to the glory it once had.
Well, it looks like it's well on its way, and the interim mayor did manage the transition well, and certainly I thought Richard could have cooperated a little initially more with the county. But one of the senses I get that Thomas has insisted on, and this does not make him for motherhood or against sin, is that something seems to be rotten in Denmark. In that old expression, where I get the sense that there is a lot more politically going on than I will ever understand, and that people really don't want to look back.
Well, Bob, I think in Mount Vernon, I think that goes into the 60s, 50s, 40s, 30s. I think it's like I said, it's very much entrenched in Mount Vernon, regardless of who's in power there. There's just something going on down there, something in the water or something where that government. I mean, seriously, what is the issue? Why is it like that?
Well, one of the things I've learned that has made me locally much more conservative than I ever was is these urban renewal agencies should be put under a microscope at the Center for Disease Control. I mean, money goes in. It's like the Roach Motel of money. Money goes in, it doesn't come out. And I don't know what they really do with it other than provide money to people who are looking for a grant. And some people do good stuff, but it's all about lining pockets.
Yeah, I think they still have an urban renewal agency in White Plains. And urban renewal came in the 60s in White Plains and literally bulldozed a quarter of the city from Marrone Avenue down to the train station, from north to south in that area, and it was just nothing. I'm literally nothing, Bob. It was just flat lots for years and years and years, and then they put that gallery up there, which now is really just a hideous monster. And now the city is developing more and more, but the urban renewal was but what they did, they tore down all the poor areas, and a lot of buildings were crappy. They needed to be torn down.
Well, that's good. At least the money seemed to be used, even if badly.
But people were, sent out to Mount Vernon, Portchester, New Rochelle, the other cities. They were displaced, and then the property just sat vacant for a while. Now, developing takes time, but who knows what was going on there? And the reason I mention all that is because of you mentioning the money issue. Like, during that time, where was the money? Where did the money go? So,
well, at least
I'm not alleging anything. I don't know.
No. I'm not alleging, but what I am asserting, and there's a difference, is that we don't know enough. These agencies need to be put under a microscope. And you know what? Even with the best of intentions, or even quite legally, when the government, and what I've learned the hard way doing news, is when the government puts a pot of money on the table for something, the fight for who gets to spend it, even if correctly, is for lack of a better word, and I don't mean it as malevolently as it sounds, corrupt. Who gets the money? What developer gets it? What organization gets it? What so-called nonprofit? If I have to look at another government-funded nonprofit that a guy goes to jail for, I'm going to get old quick. Mm-hmm. And then you find out that the payroll, that there's more money going to payroll running the nonprofit that goes to helping the people.
Yeah.
And this is, that's why I've always said if I ever ran locally, I'd probably run as a Republican. Probably shocks the hell out of people that know me, but I just can't.
And then you'd lose, right? So,
well, no, but I'm just such a centrist. But no, would you be?
Westchester is what Westchester is at this point in time. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but you're Republican. You have a real hard time prevailing here. So.
Well, you survived. You're a fine attorney, so.
I did. Yeah.
And you did well in your race, I thought. You did a little better than the Christians with the Lions, and I.
Yeah, you know what? I did great. I came in second.
Hey, listen, I will put those questions to Mimi Roca, who, by the way, if you check her background out, does have an excellent background. I didn't realize
she has an amazing background. So. Quite frankly, sure.
And
yes,
so
she does.
We shall find out. So listen, thank you very much for buzzing. We'll talk to you soon. All right, take care.
Bye, Bob.
Mike Duffy called in because he's anxious for us to talk with Mimi Rocco, who we'll be talking with. She's going to be coming in on the phone now because of some logistics. And let me see. I had to do a little, I know I played a little music there, but I had to make a couple of calls to make that happen. Oh, yes, I saw it. Good, yeah. I saw it. Let me just tell her I saw it and did my research. All right, so let's see who else is trying to call him. Oh, yes, I wanted to get AJ. Can you call me, patch me in that way, please? Long story. Okay, I can do that. Oh, somebody wants to join me, but I need to call them because of some certain problems here. Let's see if I can get my phone to work. Alrighty. It is 8:54. This is the one, the only Radio Westchester. We're the radio station at the train station. I am Bob Marrone. Now, as we go forward, we've got a number of new shows that are going to be starting up in the next week or two. We want you to be aware of that. You will start seeing some of Joe Soroselli's shows come up. We're starting podhockey.com next week, and we're almost ready. We have one more book to finish regarding, and we haven't given up with the title for the show yet, The Evolution of the Holocaust in Europe. I think the name of the show is still going to be Never Again. I think that that's really important, and I think that that is something that came out of what happened in Europe in World War II and among the Jewish diaspora, which we need to cling to and hold on to never again. We've certainly seen little redundancies of that, but hopefully, when I say little, and not that Rwanda was little, but hopefully we won't see worse still. But unless you're vigilant, unless you constantly remember that the tone and the sensibility should be never again, we run that risk. So you stay with us. This is the one, the only Radio Westchester while we get a hold of a guest. Okay, apropos of our earlier conversation, we want to spend a few minutes with this man. Next week, we'll probably spend a lot of time on this issue. Please welcome A.J. Woodson. A.J., good morning. He's the editor-in-chief of Black Westchester Magazine.
Good morning, good morning, good morning.
We did the story today, and I just spoke a little bit about it with Mike Duffy. Finally, and at last, the controller is coming in of the state of New York to look at the controller and the finances in Mount Vernon. Do you know what made this finally happen? Did someone go up to the controller's office? Did they use a flare? Did they use a flashlight, or just a single match in the cave that is his office?
I'm not exactly sure what it is that actually got him here finally. I had heard rumors that various people had been reaching out. The mayor insinuated something like this when they had the budget meeting in the city council chamber, and the mayor and the controller had exchanged words that day. They both mentioned that there was an investigation coming. I don't know if this is what they were talking about.
Okay, possibly, but do you think this is because finally people got fed up with what they perceived to be the misbehavior of the controller?
That's one narrative that is being put out by the mayor and the council. But on the other end, the controller, at least in statement, speaks about inviting this and welcoming this, and this is what we need. So
wow.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's a saving face mechanism or.
Well, guess who we got on the record this morning at 650 who wholeheartedly welcomes this wherever it leads? Richard Thomas.
Absolutely.
Wholeheartedly welcomes it.
I'm quite sure. Now, I will say this, though. People have to be careful when they invite and encourage these kind of actions, because the state controller is not going to just look at one thing.
Well, yes, of course.
The state controller is going to go through all of this stuff. And I'm not making any allegations, but, there were many allegations of misappropriating funds.
I said that to
Richard.
Richard.
Under the Richard Thomas
now
administration.
You, as a fellow reporter, you love this. I said to him, they're going to look at everything. Are you worried? And he says, no. They're going to look at some of the things. You've been accused of a lot of different things, the way you move money. And I put him on notice. I said, this could be dangerous for you, but he wants it. And in any case, whether he wants it, whether the mayor wants it, whether the controller wants it, I think people who do what you and I do want it. It's a good thing.
And to be fair, there were some rumblings. Well, it came from the Richard Thomas administration about misappropriating about funds before he got in office. So all of that's going to be looked at. Everything is going to be looked at. And I think hopefully we will finally get some answers that we've all been looking for and requesting, and answers to some of the questions you and I have been asking for the last few years.
Absolutely. So I think we're both looking forward to it. All right, I've got to get to another guest, but what we'll do is I'll be getting back to you. Let's see what we can all find out over the weekend, but this is going to be an exciting time. But as you know, I've been very hard on the controller. I thought he should have come in at the height of that.
Well, I will say, and after speaking with the former controller, Maureen Walker, she said, one of the things that the current controller, I think the word was, she's out of compliance because she doesn't have a CPA, and she never hired a deputy controller.
I've heard that. Mm-hmm.
So, those things may hopefully get straightened out in this time too. So,
Okay, thank you very much, my friend. I just wanted to get an update from you. I'm glad I did, and we'll be talking at great length early next week and see where we can go with this. A.J. Woodson, Editor-in-Chief, Black Westchester Magazine. Thank you so very much. All righty, folks, it's 9:02. We're going to be talking with Mimi Rocha, again, busy woman, as you might imagine, running for office. A very interesting background, she. And I'll give you just a little primer on her. Now, this is straight out of her bio, but we did some research last night that goes even beyond this. But these are the basics. Mimi is a former assistant United States attorney in the Southern District of New York, serving from 2001 right on up to, and I want to get it right, 2017. She was the chief of the Justice Department's Westchester Division under President Obama. She was involved in the prosecution of organized crime, gun trafficking, corrupt public officials, narcotics traffickers, sex traffickers, and child predators. In her role as chief of the Westchester Division, Rocha also served as primary liaison with law enforcement agencies and other prosecutorial offices, such as the Westchester DA's office, and coordinated and co-chaired multi-county task forces on specific issues, such as human trafficking and the opioid overdose epidemic. And she's gotten numerous rewards, including the 2016 Women in Federal Law Enforcement Award, Leadership Award. Before joining the U.S. Attorney's Office, she clerked for the Honorable John Gleason, United States District Court for the Eastern District, and the Honorable Chester J. Straub, United States Court of Appeals. Since 2017, Mimi Rocha has been Pace University Law School's Distinguished Fellow in Criminal Justice and a legal analyst on MSNBC and for NBC News. She's also been a PTA school safety chair at her children's elementary school. She graduated from New York University and had all kinds of awards there, and then went on to study American history from Harvard. So Mimi lives in Scarsdale with her husband David and 2 children. So now you know the background. She was trying to call in just a few moments ago, and we will get her on the line momentarily. Now, 2 weeks ago, perhaps it was 3 weeks ago, we spoke with Anthony Scarpino. Now, here's kind of the subtle difference. Anthony Scarpino's been there for 4 years. He was a judge. He was a member of the FBI, and he is now the incumbent district attorney. Mimi Rocha has decided to challenge him in the primary upcoming in June. Now, she lost by a single vote, I believe, during their convention, but that doesn't keep her from being on the primary ballot or running come November. That will be decided by the voters, of course, in the Democratic Party come June. Now, in looking also at her background, very obviously successful woman, also became somewhat noteworthy in 2018 for, and I'll call it a suggestion, she can better speak to this, but in looking at the relationship between the lawyers in the Manafort campaign, the Manafort defense, and some of the other things that the president's lawyers were involved in regarding the Mueller investigation, that it somehow reminded her, if we got it right, or at least had hints of the kinds of things that go on in corporate, or rather organized crime investigations. But nonetheless, that put her in the news. She's in the news as a result of being on MSNBC, as we've said. And if she's on the line now and holding, we've already shared the bio. So please welcome, for the first time here on Radio Westchester, Mimi Rocha. Good morning, and thank you for being with us this morning.
Hi, Bob. Thanks so much for having me. And next time I'm going to get there in person, but I'm glad to be with you by phone today.
Oh, that's okay. You are more than welcome, and on the phone or in person. I know. Well, one of the things that we need for people to know is you had to take your child to school this morning as well. And in fact, you know what I got a kick out of your bio? We had all these wonderful things. Not that being in the PTA isn't wonderful, but the work you did in the Southern District's office, where you went to school, being on television, being a legal analyst, going to NYU, and she's on the PTA Safety Committee. That was a nice touch.
Well, you know what? And here's the thing. I think it's important, particularly for other women out there right now who are starting their careers, to know that all of us, including me, who, I've been doing my career now, building it for, 25 years, that we have to, and men too, as parents, we have to balance it. And kids, and so I like to be honest about that. I don't want to run away from and hide the fact that, my babysitter was sick and I had to take my son to school today, and that, means I'm participating by phone. But I want women and men, I want parents to know that this is a balance, and there's no perfect balance, but we can do this, because also if we include our kids and let our kids know that what we're doing is important for the future of our country, of our community, they buy into it. And my kids have actually been so supportive of this campaign and excited about it. My son actually said to me the other day, I said, "Do you feel a little neglected lately?" And he said, "Yeah, I am neglected, but it's for a good reason."
Oh, he actually, but he said he was neglected. Well, that's great to hear from your kids, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
Well, you're too young to know about this yet, Counselor, but I have grandchildren, and it doesn't end. You're going to some of their sporting events, or you take them for the weekend, so it continues going. I need to ask you, and this is almost like a custom for me, whether they run for president or dog catcher. Now, you have had a distinguished career, but this is your first run at elective office. And so I say to you, and I've said it to the gentleman who ran against you the first time I interviewed him, or who you're running against, why do you want to do this to yourself? You have a wonderful career. Why?
It's a fair question. Look, the way I look at this is I'm not a politician, and I never will be, in my mind at least. But the job that I want, the job that I think I am best suited for, the job that I think I will be really good at and can best serve our community in a time when I think we need, people in public office who are of the highest integrity, with the most passion and the most innovative plans, more than ever now. That job, I need to run for office to get there. So I look at this as a really unusual, long job interview, and my employers are our community and the public, and so that's why I'm doing it.
Okay, I just want to double check something. Can you hear me okay? I know I got a note that maybe we were a little low.
Yeah, it was before, but it's much better now.
Okay, yeah, I just made it.
Yeah.
I work my own board, so I just made an adjustment. Okay, very good.
Got it.
And you're in the business, so you understand those things. All right. In doing my research last night, I got this sensibility that you ran, and I realize there are local issues, and we'll get to them, but that you were troubled by the direction of the current administration, where it was headed, its challenges to judges, its challenges to prosecutors, such as you were. Is that a fair beginning? You've explained why you want to help, but what is it specifically that made you say, I need to challenge the incumbent DA?
Well, because I think, like I said, that yes, it is sort of influenced by the national scene, in the sense that we have just obviously, there aren't enough minutes in the show to talk about all the horrible things coming out of Washington, the dangerous things. And one of those things in particular that I've talked a lot about is the attack on our justice system and the independence of it, and the hateful, discriminatory policies against undocumented people in our communities, the rise in hate crimes, things that really impact our local communities, the failure to act on gun safety, things like that, the sort of perpetuation of violence against women and LGBT communities. And so I think that what we need to do, we need to do everything we can as Democrats to get Donald Trump and his people out of the administration, out of the office of the White House. But in addition to that, we need to make sure that we're using every power and tool that we have at the local level to fight for these democratic values and principles. And so when I think about, as I said, running, I'm not just running for any office, I'm running for the chief prosecutor in my community, because that's what my skill set is best served for. That's where, a lot of people can go on TV. A lot of people can run for Congress. A lot of people have those skill sets. I think you have to have a background in law enforcement, in criminal justice, as a prosecutor or a defense attorney, I think, to run for district attorney. And that's one of the shortcomings I see in our current district attorney. He has never been a prosecutor. He's never been a criminal defense attorney. He has not surrounded himself with people in particular his first deputy, Paul Noto, who has a criminal justice background. And I think if we're at this moment when we're working on reforming the system, which is an absolutely necessary thing to do, we need people who have that background, who have done the day-to-day work on the cases and understand what it feels like to actually ask for, sending a sentence from a judge to send someone to prison, who knows what it feels like to talk to a crime victim's family and explain why you're giving a lower plea deal than they may want. They're really tough day-to-day things that prosecutors have to do, and I think they need a leader who's done them before. So that's kind of a broad answer, but it's sort of the impact of the national problems on the local level and how I think I can best help fix them here.
Well, I'm going to in a little while we'll move on to some of the local issues, but I did want to get into some of the other the issues that have to do with what you did before and how you see this office helping you do it further. You talked about the attacks on the prosecutorial system. We've seen that. We saw the other day, for example, where the president even suggested that Sotomayor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg should not partake. We saw what when his case coming out of the Southern District regarding his tax returns, when that goes to the Supreme Court. We've seen what some people consider to be intimidation of a witness in the Roger Stone case, and all the different things, of all the things that the president's challenged, including prosecutors in general, what has troubled you the most?
Ooh. It's all so troubling together, but I think I would actually put a lot of the things that you're saying under this category, which is politicizing our justice. That is what he is, frankly, that's what drove me to go on TV. When I left the U.S. Attorney's Office in October 2017, I saw Trump on TV talking about, our justice, our DOJ being a joke and, sort of belittling it and degrading. And he was doing that not because of any reason having to do with the country, but because that was the institution at that time that was the biggest threat to him politically, as he viewed it, because they were investigating him. And so he degrades institutions that we need people to have faith in for his own political and personal purposes. And politicizing the Justice Department is one of those that, I don't just mean the DOJ, I mean the entire justice system. For example, Bill Barr, who we know plays the role of basically defense attorney to Trump, he's talked about how police are not going to give protection to communities unless they pay more respect to the police, which is just a really kind of mob-like, extortionate statement to make. I mean, obviously law enforcement does deserve our respect overall for putting their life on the line every day, but they also are entitled to be critiqued, and never do we hold back protective services from any communities. So when Bill Barr makes statements like that, when he talks about progressive prosecutors being a danger to the community, we need to speak out about that. And if I can just make one point,
please do. Go ahead.
Bob, which is my opponent actually, and this was very surprising to me that a fellow Democrat would do this, he has tried to politicize my time at the Department of Justice. He made a statement recently where he said, criticized me for working in the Department of Justice under President Bush and under President Trump. Now, I was hired under President Bill Clinton, and I served proudly for 16 and a half years under Democrats and Republicans, because that's what prosecutors do.
Should be.
That's exactly what it should be. And so when I saw that from him, I thought, wow, that's a really dangerous thing for a fellow Democrat to be doing, to trying to politicize a prosecutor's time. We want prosecutors and justice to be independent from politics. And so that's one of my main goals here with the DA's office, is to take the politics out of the DA's office.
Now, you also, these days, you have a very distinguished role at Pace University, a really good law school. And with that in mind, with your background in mind, did you expect William Barr to behave as he's behaving? And even to the extent that you try and relate to a colleague, do you understand the positions from which he's coming?
No, I don't understand the positions from which he's coming. I mean, as I said, I served under many different attorney generals. Just like people in the DA's office, right? Served under Janine Pirro. They served under Janet DiFiore, who was initially, a Republican at one point. I mean, we serve under Republicans and Democrats. We expect policy differences. That is completely legitimate, right? The attorney general, whoever is heading up justice offices around the country, whether they be local or federal, you're going to have policy differences. And so you're not always going to necessarily agree with the policies of every administration you work for on a policy level. But that's different than the rhetoric, than, first of all, using justice offices like the Department of Justice to try and protect the president from criminal behavior and criminal investigations, by trying to use it as a political tool, by trying to politicize the conduct. And it is incumbent on us, as I said, to speak out about that. So it's not, Bill Barr, did I expect that I would like the policies? No. And would those be things that advocates and people who are not within the Department of Justice, should speak out about against? Absolutely. But what's been, I think, most dangerous and most surprising is the using of it as a political tool. And I did not expect that, though I think some people might say that was naive. But, I think a lot of people thought that the institution of the Department of Justice would, that he would honor that in its independence, and he hasn't.
I want to remind people that our guest is Mimi Rocca, longtime prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office, Southern District here in New York, now a fellow and involved at Pace University Law School, Harvard graduate, NYU graduate, Scarsdale resident. She is running for the district attorney position, now held, at least in the primary in June, now held by Anthony Scarpino. You know her from her time on MSNBC and NBC News as a legal analyst. When you looking at prosecutions, we had a call, and naturally we announced that you were coming on, and one person wanted to know. If you remember the former Senator Stevens from Alaska, who died tragically in a plane crash in his home state, that he had been the victim of what some people felt was a bad prosecution. Is it fair to say, though, that while the president and his minions may be unfair in the way they treat prosecutions, that we need to have oversight? And do we have problems in the prosecutors' offices around the country?
Well, look, yes is the short answer. This is a problem that we have to recognize, right? Like any problem, I think it's very different from the problem that, Trump is trying to make us believe we have. The problem that we have, and it's like, like any other problem, we need to acknowledge it in order to fix it. The problem is that we have prosecutorial offices at the local level, in particular, the county level, state level, where for too long, the priority was to get convictions, right? Arrest people, make cases, get convictions. Now, I was fortunate enough, even though I've been a prosecutor for a very long time, I was fortunate enough to be, I'll call it, raised by U.S. attorneys like Preet Bharara, who did not buy into that, who told me from day one, when I started as a baby prosecutor, that doing justice is what matters. And doing justice, doing the right thing, can sometimes mean pursuing a case to its utmost vigorously, when you believe in a case, when it's the right case to do, when you have the proof, et cetera, even if it's a tough case. But it can also mean changing your mind, not having tunnel vision, seeing that there are red flags in your case that you need to be paying attention to. Listening to defense attorneys when they point out problems to you. So that is something that we need to reform, that mindset. And then in particular, we need to have specialized units in DA's offices called conviction integrity units, and I could talk about that a little bit if you want.
Yeah, I did. I wanted to get to conviction integrity units because, again, I think back. I don't know if you were familiar with the Stevens case at that time, Senator Stevens, but how does that how does that happen? How do we not have that? And I'm saying this to be balanced because my feelings, frankly, are the same as yours when it comes to the current administration. But one gets the sense that Democrats at times have been too political as well. Was Stevens the victim of that, to your knowledge, or are you not familiar with the case?
I mean, I'm familiar with it, having read about it in the papers, the same way everybody else is. I don't have any, sort of having inside perspective on it. But look, I mean, I think that there are certainly times and cases when people, prosecutors don't get it right? Mm-hmm. And it's when, and I'm not saying that happened in the Stevens case, because again, I think there are different perspectives on
sure.
it. But I think whether you're talking about federal prosecutors, county prosecutors, state prosecutors, whatever your local prosecutors, you cannot let your personal and political opinions, you're allowed to have those, but mm-hmm. you cannot let them influence your prosecutorial decisions. Those need to be based on facts and law and justice and doing the right thing. It's one of the reasons that I actually did not register as a Democrat while I was a federal prosecutor. That doesn't mean I didn't vote like a Democrat, but I think that federal prosecutors in particular who bring public corruption cases, who bring cases against people, elected officials, mm-hmm. need to be need to not only be independent in their decision making, but need to allow people to understand that they're being independent, because faith in the justice system and in its objectivity is almost as important as the
Absolutely.
Actual. Right? Because we need people to have faith in our decisions.
Now, you mentioned, and I cut you short with my little question there, but you were going to talk about some of the efforts in oversight when I asked my question. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think, as you raised, it's a really important issue that I think prosecutors, and it's a big part of the reform movement, coming around to saying, you know what, we haven't always gotten it right, okay? And I believe that a lot of those mistakes are due to, bad training and negligence. We don't have to attribute, ill will to times necessarily where there is or deliberate misconduct. There might be, but not always. But we do have cases where innocent people have gone to jail. We know that. And we need to say that out loud. We have a pretty well-known case of that here in Westchester, and there's been more than one, but the one I think that a lot of people know about is Jeffrey Deskovic.
Yeah, he's a regular here. He's a regular on this broadcast. We know all about that. Go continue, please.
So Jeff Deskovic, at the age of 17, was in prison for 15 years for a rape and murder in Peekskill that he did not commit. He went to trial. There was essentially a coerced confession. Mm-hmm. There was, all sorts of factors that contributed to it. He was eventually exonerated by Jonathan Fiore, was his DA at the mm-hmm. time. Jeff Deskovic now went on to Pace Law School. He actually was my student for a year.
Is that right? Yeah, I went to his graduation and covered it.
That's wonderful.
Someone I think we both know, Murray Richmond, had introduced me, the famous defense attorney, had introduced me to Jeff, and we had him on while he was still plying his case. An extraordinary human being. And folks, just a very quick sidebar, not only did he go back to college and get his degree, he went to law school, recently passed the bar, travels the country, and I kidded him on the air. We were was on WFAS at the time, and he comes in and he started the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice after he got all that money. I said, Jeff, mm-hmm. I could see me in the islands with that money now, and here you are. But at any rate, but I'm glad to hear you bring that up because it is important.
Yeah, exactly. And Jeff, his foundation, which works to exonerate other people in his situation and works more broadly on criminal justice reform. Yes. He recently endorsed me. His foundation endorsed me after interviewing me quite extensively, I might say.
Well, as did Preet Bharara, by the way. You did get an endorsement from.
Preet Bharara has endorsed me, and even though I worked for him, it is not a given that Preet Bharara endorses people. He's a Westchester resident, by the way. And he only endorses people who he knows personally, and even then he does it in very limited circumstances. So I was quite honored to have his endorsement. And I've been endorsed by numerous elected officials here in Westchester as well. But back to conviction integrity. So my point is that we need processes, formal units set up in district attorney's offices, which most DA's office in New York State have. I put out a plan for a comprehensive conviction integrity unit based on
Yes.
the expertise that I gathered from the Innocence Project, from exonerees like Jeff Deskovic, from the New York State Bar, who's done extensive studying and recommendations about how conviction integrity units should look. They should be independent. They should have criteria set out ahead of time. They should have a stable set of prosecutors assigned. They should have a board and advisors of defense attorneys, exonerees, exoneration agencies, things like that. It's not something we just should make up as we go along, right? So I put out this comprehensive plan, and then lo and behold, my opponent, the incumbent, said, oh, I have a conviction review unit already. Now, this is something that was never on his website. It was not in his budget. He had never talked about it before. But when I put out my plan, he claimed to have one. And his plan of a conviction review unit that he supposedly has is one person who, he brought in a couple years ago to do professional responsibility, but now he's putting a label on him of conviction review unit. And that, to me, exemplifies the problem with the current DA's office and the incumbent.
Well,
it's window dressing. It's labeling. It's superficial. And we need, if you're going to talk about real justice, which is about people's lives on both sides, victims and people who are charged and or incarcerated, we need to take this more than superficial. We need to have real substance, real plans, real ideas. And that's why my plans, when I come out with them, keep getting endorsed by the experts. Like
I want to get into some of those local issues in just a minute. Again, I remind people, you're hearing the voice now of Mimi Rocca. She is running for the district attorney, the nomination for it in the June primary versus the incumbent when she mentioned her opponent, Vincent Scardino. Next question. We're going to get into some local stuff in a moment, but I need to go here only because in the same spirit of what troubled you, in my 20 years of broadcasting, I don't think anyone has troubled me more than the evolution of Jeanine Pirro being on TV. Okay, I have to be honest with it. About that. Both her role in Deskovic's case, going back to that, and now being not just an apologist but a proponent and even working on the president's campaign. Unfortunately, since you're already on TV in a quite different role, or on MSNBC and NBC, how do you respond to people that will say, "Oh God, we don't want another TV person"?
Hold on, I'm sorry, I'm having phone problems.
That's okay. It may have been me. I turned my head to sip coffee.
There we go. I got it back.
Okay.
How do I respond to that? I respond to that by saying I'm not a TV person. I went on TV 2 years ago and started speaking out about the rule of law, the independence of the Department of Justice. As I said, literally watching Donald Trump on TV talking about our justice system and trying to politicize it for his own personal reasons. It was not something I ever really wanted to do, to be quite honest. Prosecutors, particularly from the Southern District of New York, if you ask any one of them 5 years ago, they would have said, nope, we don't do that. We don't go on TV. That's just not something we do. We go on and we do public service in different ways. But I really, during this time and this administration, viewed this, and I still do, as a public service that I was doing. If I wanted to be a TV personality or a TV person, I would have stayed on TV. I wouldn't be running for district attorney. So this is, I viewed that as a sort of necessary part of a way of doing public service in a different way during this very unusual time that we're in. But I am really, I was on TV for 2 years, but I was a prosecutor for 16 and a half years. And even before I went to law school, I worked in criminal justice. This is my passion. This is where I belong.
All right, let's move on to, I do want to talk a little bit about the Southern District. The president, as I noted, has come out and said, which of course they're not going to do. I don't think neither Sotomayor nor Ruth Bader Ginsburg is going to recuse themselves from his case. Now, the Southern District does have this case regarding the president's tax returns. How much can the fact that the Attorney General is working on the president's behalf, how much can he put a stop to that? What's going on with the Southern District in the pursuit of those records?
Well, I don't think we know the answer to that, unfortunately. I mean, I've said publicly I'm concerned about Bill Barr's influence on the Southern District of New York. It's not just that case; it's also the investigation into the people involved in Ukraine.
Well,
and,
yes, of course.
Touching on Rudy Giuliani, and I think that we should all be talking about it. We should be concerned about it. Bill Barr needs to get in front of the Senate and testify under oath. It's happening at the end of March, but that seems like a leisurely pace. This is absolutely frightening because the Southern District has traditionally been allowed to do its thing, and I think if it's allowed to do its thing, it will do the right thing, whatever that means. And again, I mean, I have my inklings as someone who knows about Donald Trump and reads about Donald Trump and how he runs his businesses and administration, that doing the right thing would end in, would end likely in some criminal prosecutions when I look at Rudy Giuliani. But I'm not the prosecutor on the case.
No, that's my next question.
I think we should. But to the point, I think that our concerns about Bill Barr and his influence on an office as independent as the Southern District of New York has traditionally been, that is all the more important why we need our local prosecutors to be as strong counterweights as possible. Does that mean that as DA I can, indict Donald Trump? I don't know. He has a golf course in Westchester. I mean, there are certainly things to look at. As a prosecutor, I would never say that I'm going to indict or investigate anyone. That's not something prosecutors should do. But I certainly think that we need people in our local prosecutorial offices around the country, not just in New York, as we have, for example, in Tish James, who are willing to use every tool available to fight back against this administration when you have the specter of Bill Barr controlling the federal justice.
Is it dangerous, Counselor, when in order to fight back, how do you keep from fighting back for fighting back's sake? It has to be, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but so I understand you correctly, it has to be in a case-by-case basis. In other words, not everything the president's going to do, not everything Bill Barr is going to do is going to be, for lack of a better word, nefarious. So fighting back can't just be a state of constant readiness, if you follow me.
I do, and I agree with that, and that's why I was trying to say, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to investigate or prosecute someone. What I'm saying is we need, that's why the individual, the person who we elect matters so much, right? I think Tish James is a great example of someone who has taken an office that, the New York Attorney General's office has always had, different tools at its ready, right, available to use. But she is innovative in the way that she uses those. She isn't out to get someone, but she's looking for ways, we hear about misuse of charitable funds. Okay, well, what tools do we have available to investigate that? I think people in the DA's offices, have the same opportunity. It's not that you're, okay, what can I go do against Donald Trump? But prosecutors get leads from press reports all the time. That's always been true. And there is so much reporting on conflicts of interest, possible ethical violations, possible criminal conduct by Trump and people in his administration. If you as a prosecutor read about that, you think, okay, well, what's my role here? Yeah. And you've got to be, just like you have to be innovative with policies about how to approach, policies that we're going to talk more about, like gun safety. Yeah,
I'm going to get to that in a moment.
Sex trafficking. We have to be innovative of how to think, also how to protect people in our community, like undocumented people in our community who need extra protection right now because they're being targeted. How does the DA's office do that? And I have ideas for how to do that better than it's currently being done.
Apropos of what you said earlier about some of the things that you read and see, you wound up in the news rather than doing the news, I guess, in 2018. And I'm going to use the word intimated because I read the story a couple of times last night about how some of the relationships between the president's lawyers and Manafort's defense lawyers, if I got it right, either reminded you or touched a little bit on some of the things that organized crime lawyers do. Can you elaborate on that? And what was actually the basis of that story?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of ways in which Trump and his administration and his use of lawyers in particular has reminded me. I was chief of the organized crime unit in the Southern District and did a lot of organized crime cases. And one of the sort of key characteristics, I would say, of the way in which mob families do exert control and try to avert law enforcement is through the use of lawyers. And they do this because, if a lawyer is involved in communications, if a lawyer is involved in conduct, right, whether, passing messages, is a very explicit way of putting it, but it can be more subtle than that. It can be writing a letter. It could be telling someone in a phone call something that, is implied or explicit. But when lawyers do that, it is harder for law enforcement to penetrate that because you want to respect the attorney-client privilege, which is an important privilege, but it cannot be used as a shield. And so this is something I've been saying since the days of Michael Cohen, that, yeah, of course, Trump for a while was saying, well, Michael Cohen, what lawyer records people? That's crazy, and criticizing Cohen. Well, the kind of lawyer who Donald Trump would hire, because he hires lawyers who are willing to sort of be used in that way to facilitate what I view as, at best, unethical conduct and at worst criminal. And so that's what I was talking
Mimi
about.
Rocca is our guest. She's running for district attorney in the primary in June versus the incumbent, of course, the Democratic Party, the incumbent Anthony Scarpino. 17 years in the U.S. Prosecutor's Office, Southern District of New York, organized crime, one of the specialties, of course, dealing with women's issues and assaults, etc. Also now at Pace University, a fellow there, and quite the background. Now, I got two men I want to ask you about, get your opinion, because it's apropos of where you've gone with all of this. And then we'll get comparing you to the current district attorney and some of the local issues you care about. I got to ask, Rudy Giuliani, and once a legendary prosecutor in the very office you worked in, what do you think is motivating him? What happened to him? What is even the scuttlebutt?
What is motivating him? I definitely cannot. I mean, I've given up on trying to understand what motivates people who not only are follow Trump but are beholden to him. But I think Giuliani in a lot of ways, like other prosecutors who have been in the news. He's a sign of, he's a cautionary tale, right? I mean, look, he was a prosecutor in a different era, and he was very aggressive. And there are a lot of people who would say, he was always too aggressive. But whatever you think of him, I think that he did at least do lip service to, again, the independence of the Department of Justice and law enforcement following laws and facts and not using it for political purposes. And that clearly is, like, we are so far at the other spectrum from him. So how that happens, I don't know. But I think that all of us as prosecutors need to look at that, need to look at people like Jeanine Pirro, need to look at Linda Fairstein, who once, I once looked up to because she started sex crimes units in DA's offices, which allowed sex crimes to be taken seriously.
Remember.
But then, obviously, was behind the Central Park 5 case, which is a huge tragedy. And so we, as prosecutors, need to keep these examples in mind of prosecutors who, whether you agreed with them or didn't agree with them, were I think, sincerely trying to do the right thing as prosecutors and lost that somewhere along the way. And we need to keep that in mind. And as I said at the beginning of this interview, we need to acknowledge out loud that things happen, that prosecutors, make mistakes, whether they be intentional or not. And we need to figure out the best systems in place to prevent that. And those are some of the things I think are not being done in the DA's office.
One more name.
There is no implicit bias training happening in our DA's office under this district attorney.
We're going to get to that in a moment.
Opportunity.
I have one more question, and it's kind of selfish, but again, it's apropos of why you're running. And I'm going to start out with just a personal feeling. I was disappointed that Robert Mueller, who by all accounts is a brilliant man of integrity, that he did not draw more conclusions, and perhaps it's not a prosecutor's role. Might it have made a difference if he wasn't so careful with his words? Or do you think he had no choice?
Well, to answer the first question, I absolutely think it would have made a difference. And I think we know that from looking at what happened during impeachment, which I know ended a certain way, but, you know, if you followed the day-to-day of that, the fact that you had people on TV, on Twitter, in press conferences like Adam Schiff, like my friend Dan Goldman, who is counsel to the House Intelligence Committee, you had people like that, you know, on a day-to-day basis, fact-checking, essentially, right? So you had the president's spin on what was going on, the administration's spin, but then you had the reality and facts coming out through witnesses, coming out in the media. Mueller, we didn't have that. It was months and months and months of administration spin, and then the facts came out, and by then, frankly, it was too late. That is the difference between a regular prosecution in a courtroom where people have an open mind until they hear all the facts, a jury does, a judge does, versus essentially a trial in the public arena. And so Mueller, it's not that he didn't have a choice, but I understand the choice he made because of the kind of traditional prosecutor he is. And you know, it's hard for me to criticize that because that, you know, he was true to who he is. It's unfortunate for the country because I think it was a missed opportunity there because the conduct that Mueller did uncover is really shocking, and it's why I was one of the original, you know, organizers of and signers of a letter of, you know, over 1,000 former federal prosecutors who said Trump would have been charged with a crime.
That's interesting.
If he were not president.
Because I'll give you my own take, only for the sake of two people talking politics. I thought he had his moment of history on stage and jumped into the orchestra pit. That's how I've always characterized it on the air. Okay, let's move into the meat of the issue. We now know where you stand on the issues, what motivated you. But, of course, all politics and all the prosecution of the law, most of it is local. You've mentioned a few things. You've mentioned not having a program for implicit bias. You've mentioned some other things. Contrast yourself and Mr. Scarpino, and tell us what locally concerns you, and when asked the kinds of questions, and I'm going to let you have some free reign here, what bothers you about the way he's running the office now? What would you do differently? What are the issues you care most about?
Sure. So let me break it into two categories. One is sort of the safety and criminal justice issues that I would prioritize. And the other is an overall approach to running a office of justice, let's call it. It's not the Justice Department, but the District Attorney's Office is an office of justice in our community. And I'll address the second one first. I believe, as I said, that we need to take the politics out of the DA's office. It's an elected office, but it should not be a political office. What do I mean by that? I mean, for example, I will do hirings of staff, which I think is one of the most important decisions a district attorney makes. I will do hiring of my executive staff based on prioritizing, reflecting the diversity of the community and skill, experience, people who are passionate about criminal justice issues in the 21st century. As I mentioned, the fact that that the district attorney is someone with no prosecutorial or criminal defense experience, then hired as his right-hand man the person who was his campaign manager and made $40,000 in contributions to his campaign, Paul Noto, and has never worked in the criminal justice system. He is a land use lawyer. He is a politician. Those are not the people that should be running our justice system in this complicated era of criminal justice reform and police issues and issues that are really complicated and affect our day-to-day lives. We need professionals, criminal justice experts running those kinds of offices. So that's one way. I am starting already to take any kind of conflict of interest out of the office before I even get there. I'm not taking donations from police unions. I am not taking donations from criminal defense attorneys with cases in front of the office that I will lead, because I believe there is not only the potential for real conflict, but the appearance of conflict. And as you and I discussed, people's faith in my decisions as being independent from conflicts, whether they be political or financial, I need people to have faith in my decisions. I think that goes a long way. So I am also will not take donations from people who work for me in the office, as something our current district attorney regularly does. He also uses his campaign staff, his executive and other staff in the office to work on his campaign, which I think is, in my opinion, an abuse of office and an abuse of power, really. It is not something that in this day and age we should be using the power of the district attorney's office for to work on a campaign, and it's something that the New York State Bar Association has said. So I believe in ethical reform for the DA's office. I believe in better, more effective hiring practices to get, and the opportunity to start at the top to give people who are already in the office a real opportunity to be the best prosecutors they could be. I will talk to them on day one. I will talk to them individually, in groups, and overall to say, you guys are the ones out there every day making these hugely important decisions. I know, because I did it for 16 years, I know how scary it is to make these decisions. I know what power assistant district attorneys have. They have immense power. So I want to teach you about my value system, about doing justice, not just seeking prosecution, that it's okay to lose a case when it's the right thing to bring a hard case, and it's okay to dismiss a case when you realize you've made a mistake, and that we should be open and transparent. It's why I've proposed sweeping transparency changes for the office to put out information about the DA's finances, forfeiture assets, how we're getting money, how we're spending the money, on what programs, to put out information about racial disparities in arrests and prosecutions, to put out information about sex crimes, real data about which cases are coming in and which cases we're actually prosecuting.
Is that not happening now?
Absolutely not. It is not happening now. Not only is he not affirmatively putting it out, but when he was called upon to release what's called, people call it a bad cops list. I like to call it an adverse credibility list, because that's what it should be. It's a list of police officers with whom the office works, or law enforcement with whom the office works, who could not be used as witnesses. And other DAs have put this out. The community was calling it on Scarpino to put it out. He delayed for months and months. And when it finally came out, after, I think because he was in a bind and how to put it out, it was clear why he delayed putting it out. He delayed putting it out because the person he hired to be the head of his intelligence center, the Westchester Intelligence Center, which is a premier, center, is really the hub of intelligence and information gathering, or one of them in Westchester. And this is a plum job for a retired law enforcement person. He hired someone who had been an FBI agent, who I obviously, respect FBI. I worked with them for 16 years. But this particular agent had a finding of no candor by the FBI for lying during an official investigation.
Wow.
And I just don't understand why you would hire someone of all the retired law enforcement in the country. And this man may have many skills, but it's not about his character, but it's about Scarpino's character in hiring someone like that. It's about his judgment in making that decision. And then that he had to delay putting out this list because he didn't want people to know. I mean, that's what my inference is, that he clearly delayed putting out this list because he didn't want people to know that his own head of the intelligence center was on that list. Again, we should not be making decisions in law enforcement that are about us personally, right? He should be making the decision about what's best for the community. And what was best for the community was to put that list out like other DAs around the state.
Two other issues, two that have been in the news lately. One affects the prosecutor's office prosecutors' offices across New York, and it has to do with two things. One, the new rules regarding discovery. We understand that it's causing delays and it's costing money, but I know attorneys we have from all stripes, Republican, conservative, liberal, not, they all support playing with on a more level playing field, but it is going to cost the prosecutor's offices money. What's your take on this?
Absolutely. Here's my take on it. I came from a system, the federal system, where discovery was produced within 10 days to 2 weeks after charging. So it's like the system we have now moved to in New York. I came from a system where we had basically open file discovery in most cases. I came from a background, a mindset of turning over discovery, even if you didn't have to. You know why? Because it's not only the right thing to do because it levels the playing field for defense attorneys, it's also better for the prosecution. And this is a failed opportunity that I think our district attorney has missed, which is to explain to law enforcement, because I've talked with law enforcement a lot, and you know what? They want to do the right thing. They want it. Yeah, this is a pain. You say, yeah, I get it. This is a hassle right now. But we're going to get the system in place, and as we get it in place, here's what's good about it for you and for prosecutors. Discovery in the hands of defense attorneys early is going to help prosecutors weed out the cases that they should not be spending their time on. The worst thing for law enforcement, for prosecutors, is to spend months on a case and then find out on the eve of trial or during trial, oh my God, I've got a real problem with my case. Now, you would like for law enforcement to be the ones to figure that out, but we can't always, or we don't always. But you know who can do that? Defense attorneys. And we need to, this is part of my point about needing to listen to defense attorneys. It doesn't mean that every time a defense attorney says to a prosecutor, hey, you've got a problem with your case, you just dismiss it. But you listen, and then you look, and you're willing to look at the red flags and have an open mind. This is pulling together everything you and I have talked about during this hour about how prosecutors make mistakes. And I think that this discovery reform, for the most part, is a good thing, both because it's more fair to the defense and because it will help prosecutors and law enforcement be more efficient and prioritize the right cases.
But what we are hearing, though, and I think most people would agree with just what you said, it's costing money. It may cause prosecutors' offices everywhere to review how they do their work. But it's a necessary evil, I suspect.
Well, yes, and also you have to be efficient about how you do it. I mean, it's like anything else that we do, in not just in criminal justice. It has short-term costs, but I think it will have an overall long-term benefit, both as we just discussed, and even financially, because you're going to spend less time on cases you shouldn't be spending time on. So it's about efficiency. The current district attorney wanted to get more prosecutors to implement. Hired to implement this discovery. I would have asked for what I think they wanted to give him, which was more paralegals, because I know from years of doing discovery that paralegals, those are the people who are key to really implementing a good discovery system, and you need a system. So I think, I do think we need to make sure that the discovery reforms are protecting crime victims. There are some areas that I would want to look at closely. I am the daughter of a rape victim. Have been a crime victim myself. And, but I talk about this because I come at this position from different points of view. And I think it's, we need to be nuanced in the way we look at this. This is really serious, important stuff that affects both victims' lives and people who are charged in it.
Speaking of nuance, the new bail law, the polls keep going up. People are not happy with it. We have, it seems like there may be a slight amendment to it, giving judges more discretion. We have the leader of the Senate, Andrea Stewart Cousins, who wants to see some amendment. We have Mr. Hasty, who is not in favor of it. Where do you stand on this? The public cares about this one a lot. And, of course, a lot of the transgressions are anecdotal, but they're there. Where do you stand on this?
Right. But I think that's an important point. So overall, I think bail reform was absolutely necessary in New York State. I think most people would agree with that. Again, I came from a federal system where people were not incarcerated because they couldn't afford to pay bail. I mean, that just did not happen. And that is just absolutely something we had to fix. We cannot criminalize poverty. And the fact that people were being held in jail because they couldn't pay an amount of bail money, regardless of the crime, is just absolutely inhumane. So that had to change. That changed. That's good. Now the question is, what exactly does that look like? I think there's some really good parts of the bail reform. I think that there are parts we need to see. I do wish people would give it some more time because I don't believe in making policy, criminal justice policy, based on anecdote. I think it's, easier for the press to write stories about things that have gone wrong in certain cases or are described as having gone wrong. But I think, you would like someone to also write a story about the probably hundreds, if not, already 1,000 people who have not been incarcerated, and they're, for small offenses because they couldn't pay for bail, and therefore not lost their jobs or not lost custody of their kids or not stopped their drug treatment, things like that. So there are success stories, I think, that we're not hearing about. So I am troubled by the sort of idea that we aren't going to give this any time to collect real data. That's part of my transparency plan. I believe that we can get real information. But I do overall, I've said this before, believe that we need some kind of judicial remand option, but it must be coupled with real training for prosecutors, for police officers, and frankly for judges on implicit bias. And again, not something that has happened under Anthony Scarpino, and I do not understand that. You need to have implicit bias training. You need to have all sorts of training to couple it, to make sure that the decisions that judges are making, that the requests prosecutors are making to judges are as free from bias as we can possibly make them. And then you need to put out real data. This is part of my transparency. You need the public to see, okay, what's happening now that we have this option? Who's getting remanded? Is it people of color who are getting remanded more? And if so, why? Where? Which judge? We need to really put that out there so we can examine it and look at it. So it can't be done in a vacuum. So that's what I would say about the bail. And there's some things that I think need to change right away. For example, the no bail on Rob 2. If someone comes into your house, whether or not violence is used, I do not think that person should be let go on their own recognizance. I quite frankly think that was probably a somewhat of a mistake. They were trying to protect people who in New York City would go into vestibules and steal packages. And, that's a very different crime from someone who comes into someone's home. But we need, again, nuance. Like this is
nuance. I
I
love that word. Well, we're coming up at the end, but something that I always do. And first of all, I want to thank you, Mimi Rocha. She's running in the June primary for district attorney versus the incumbent Anthony Scarpino in the June Democratic primary. As we've said, she's been in the prosecutor's office, the U.S. Attorney's office for 16, 17 years. She's a fellow and teaches at Pace University Law School. And I'm going to throw in, yes, she's on the PTA safety committee for her child's school. Now, before you go.
And I work for Moms Demand Action.
Well, you've got so many different things. I had to limit it or we wouldn't even have the hour to talk so expansively. And I really, really appreciate it. But I want to give you a chance. So there I am in the booth. I've got Scarpino and I have Rocha. You've got a couple of minutes. Why should I or anyone listening pull the lever for you? Or in this case, fill out the card.
So I'm going to answer. Thank you for that opportunity, and thank you for having this. It's been a great discussion. I really, really enjoyed it. I'm going to talk about something that I never got to my part two because part one was so.
Go ahead. Anything I missed?
Also.
Go ahead.
No, but I think it's really the closing argument here, which is we need a DA now who not only brings the highest sort of ethical reforms and standards and transparency and focus on criminal justice reform in substantive ways to leading this office, because Westchester should be a leader in the country for these things, not a follower, but also who looks at the problems. My opponent likes to talk about how crime rates are down, and that's a great thing, and they may be down in certain areas, but there are areas that are rising, and we need a prosecutor who focuses on the modern-day issues that we have today. For example, rising hate crimes. Why does our Westchester Intelligence Center now not gather intelligence based on hate crimes as a category? That makes absolutely no sense. That's our number one tool against hate crimes is intelligence gathering online and sharing of information amongst law enforcement. We need a lead prosecutor who looks at sex trafficking, which is one of the areas that is rising in Westchester, and particularly because of the internet and online activity. And that's why one of my first proposals was creating a human trafficking unit that looks at that connection, that works on that. That's been something I've worked on as a prosecutor very passionately here in Westchester for the last 5 years that I was leading the office there. We need someone who focuses on modern-day sex crime prosecutions, that looks at people like Harvey Weinstein, that looks at what happened at Sarah Lawrence College in our backyard. Yep. How did that go on for so long without law enforcement detection? We need a prosecutor who is attuned and sensitive to that and to the kinds of sexual assaults that are happening to our young people today, involving drugs and alcohol-induced lack of consent and other things like that. We need someone who is focused on getting more guns off the street. There is so much more we could be doing right now. It's one thing to have red flag laws passed. That's great. But we need a district attorney who's a leader in making sure that they're implemented, that domestic violence victims in particular are educated about them, because that is who they will save the lives for the most. So those are some, and finally, I would say on the opioid crisis, we need more innovative solutions to that. We need more alternative to incarceration programs to end the cycle of the revolving door cycle of mass incarceration. Those are the things that I am not only running on, but truly thinking about and getting expert advice and help and coming up with these plans, and why my plans have been endorsed by experts, because I reach out to them and I draw on their expertise. I believe in collaboration, not doing this in a vacuum.
Well, Mimi Rocha, I want to thank you very, very much. I know an hour is a long time, but that's a public service we try and provide. My very best to you. I hope you'll come back. We want to have you back, and we'll even try and get a debate together here. But my very best to you. Good luck to you. Mimi Rocha, she is a longtime prosecutor in U.S. Attorney's Office, has done many, many things, including the safety committee at her PTA. She's now teaching at Pace, MSNBC and NBC analyst as well. Thank you very, very much for all your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob. I really enjoyed it.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. All righty, folks. That slams the lid on things for today. We will have her back. We'll have Anthony Scarpino back. We have people to thank. The man right in front of me, Jake Schaefer, Vince Russo, A.J. Woodson, Victor Sternberg, and of course we got a call in from our good friend Mike Duffy. We got a chance to get some questions from him for the district attorney candidate, and of course district attorney candidate Mimi Rocha. We want to thank our sponsors, Aging Issues Management, the law firm of Payne & Kahn, Dominic's Fine Cigars, Plug-in Virtual Reality. Also, United Hebrew of New Rochelle, a top-rated campus of senior care. Visit uhgc.com. They also bring you the weather exclusively, and we'll just give you a tag on the weather for the rest of the day. It's already 33, going to get up to 38 today. It's pretty sunny right now. They tell us we'll be mostly cloudy later, but it doesn't look like it. Our temperature leveling off at about 38. And then tonight, clear skies, the temperature 24, the wind out of 10 to 15. And why not tell you about Saturday so you can look forward to it? Partly sunny and breezy, the temperature will be 36. Now, I want to just throw this one out at you. We will be here Tuesday night because we will be covering Super Tuesday right here on Radio Westchester. This is Radio Westchester. We are, of course, the radio station at the train station. I'm Bob Marrone. This has been Mornings with Bob Marrone. We're going to get that interview with Mimi Rocha podcasted separately for all kinds of obvious reasons. Remember, we're here each and every day. That is the morning show from 6:30 to 10. We hope you'll come back on Monday morning. And again, we'll have more to say Monday about the Tuesday evening show. We'll probably start at about 7 o'clock as the returns start to come in. And we'll have a number of different public officials here to comment on the returns on Super Tuesday. Thank you very much for listening. I'm Bob Marrone on behalf of Jake Schaefer. Have a great weekend.